Good evening again. This is the Gloucester School Committee. We are resuming in open session. Instructions speaking. Yeah. Okay, so I'll read the instructions for public comment. When that is up, if you're calling in on a phone, you can press *9 to request to speak. If you're watching on a computer or device, there's a raise hand button that you can tap or press to request to speak. Please use either of these options during all communications to be recognized to speak. I ask that you join me. Let's switch the slide. So maybe let's start with introductions as to who is here this evening. Start with Kate Smith. Amy Pascarello, Assistant Superintendent.
Ed Lomas, Superintendent. Steve Minio, School Committee.
Melissa Friends, School Committee. Kathy Clancy, School Committee. Samantha Watson, School Committee.
William Melvin, School Committee.
Laura Wilson, School Committee. Lynn Beatty, Principal at O'Malley.
Kate Robertson, Curriculum and Instruction Coordinator at O'Malley.
Jeff Destino, Assistant Principal at O'Malley.
Maria Puglisi, Recording Secretary.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. The next order of business is oral communications. If there is anyone in attendance that would like to address the committee, now is your opportunity. And we have Amy Orlando, who would like to speak. If you could state your name and address, please.
Hello. Hi, my name is Amy Orlando and I live at 22 Acacia Street. My street is part of the new rezoning plan and I'm still having many concerns along with other parents about the uncertainty behind this plan. We have requested time and time again that families that are currently in the school with a younger sibling that will be starting school in the next couple of years be surveyed to see how many are actually affected. I've done some research on my own and came up with about 17 families. I'm sure there might be a few more, but will there actually be that many more? We've been surveyed about where we want to send our current children, and the only answer for their siblings is that we have to hope that there's space for their older siblings at their older siblings' school when they're ready to attend kindergarten. As working parents, we need more certainty. Having two children in different schools that begin at the same time poses a huge challenge for drop-off and for pickup. The schools host many special events such as holiday concerts, PTO events, backyard growers programs, etc., that could potentially fall on the same day. It's too much to force parents to juggle two different schools and be fully involved in each. After attending the meeting in January for affected families, it was nice to hear that the schools are similar academically. However, there are still some big differences within the schools, as there should be. I love that the schools are all unique in their own ways. However, my children are excited to be in a school together, experiencing milestones, assemblies, and celebrations that they can both come home and talk about together. Overall, my ask is that the discussion of this can be put back on the agenda to have a discussion with families affected by the rezoning that already have children established in their own neighborhood school. If anything, survey and see how many families will have children entering within the next couple of years. Perhaps that will give us some more of a guarantee. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Anybody else in attendance that wants to speak? Seeing none, we will go on to recognitions. There's a lot of things, I'm sure. Busy time. Go ahead, Laura.
Well, I just wanted to start with Beauty and the Beast Junior at O'Malley. Congratulations to everyone involved in that program. It's amazing. I know many of my fellow school committee members, they want to say something about it. Just really fantastic. And so great to see so many kids involved, students involved and participating in so many different ways. So it's really sweet. I wanted to commend all of them. Great.
Two things. One, I wanted to shout out to the West Parish School for the presentation of Annie that went on recently. They continue to roll out great plays over there. There's a tremendous amount of kids involved in theater over there. It's really great to see, so. Wonderful thing, and I also wanted to note, especially for my colleagues today, being shout out to International Women's Day, but my colleagues here on the school committee, educators. So thank you for all that you do.
Thank you. Pete?
I just wanted to say, yeah, I really enjoyed the plays both at O'Malley and West Parish. My daughter in particular is quite inspired, and there's some really stellar standout performances for the play at O'Malley, and especially memorable. I think it was Group B that I saw with the Kendall, whoever played the candelabra character. I think she stole the show in particular. I think everyone was buzzing about her, like the accent alone, the French accent. She just really nailed it.
Okay. We'll let the student council speak, and then there's things that we want to add after that. Hi, Carvelis, thank you for joining us.
Hi, can you hear us?
Hi, she's muted.
Just have to unmute if you can find it. Or Maria, can you unmute her?
Elena's.
It's like you're muted, Kaya.
Probably way more familiar with
Are you having trouble on finding the unmute button?
They just.
She said it's not working.
Not working.
If you can try and join on your phone. Yeah, you click the link on your phone.
Everyone's muted.
She just said I can't unmute. Hold on.
Okay, do you have a phone that you want to call in on?
Mixed it, you know.
Maria, there's a phone number in panelist, is that her?
Oh,
Looks like she's dialed the number.
Oh, yeah, it's
Oh,
fine.
yeah, she just showed us. Good, good.
Kylie, try talking now.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. Good,
Okay, sorry.
thank you.
I apologize.
Don't worry, you're doing great. No worries.
Thank you. So we have the blood drive coming up on March 17th. So that's like fun. We got a lot of kids to donate, which is great. NHS applications are due tomorrow and the induction will be on March 23rd. The Power of Play will be held at GHS from 11 to 2 on March 26th. A number of our NHS students will be volunteering. The hockey team and basketball teams both made it into playoffs, but sadly lost in very close games. As of tomorrow, the senior countdown begins. We will have 57 school days left and 78 days total. The Seal of Biliteracy exam will be held in April. Last weekend, the GHS Drama Club performed a production of A Midsummer Night's Dream at Algonquin Regional High School in the METG Theater Celebration. Students at GHS were recognized for their work. Freely Dowd, lighting design, Malia Andrews, costume design, Elijah Saroof for the role of Bottom, and Willow Berry for the role of Puck. And Deck Estates is Friday, March 10th, and 3 students from GHS will be presenting. Isla Black for Financial Consulting, Jessica Harvey for Principles of Business Management and Administration, and Brady Patton for Quick Service Restaurant Management. And if they make it to states, or if they make it past states, they get to go to Nationals, which is held in Orlando, Florida this year. So that's all I have tonight.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions or comments? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Have a good night. Thank you. Bye. So I'm going to add to the recognitions for one sport. We have a summary here of all of our of all the sports this winter. The winter teams certainly had quite an eventful season for each of them. The girls ice hockey just finished its 3rd full season, which is quite exciting. Apparently years ago, there used to be varsity girls hockey, went away for quite a while, and they really, I remember being on the committee when they came to us to say, please put hockey back. And it's nice to see that it's back and really strong, really good results from the team. So I have a write-up from Rob Parsons, who took over towards the end of the season and stepped in and really inspired the girls to do a great job. So he says the GHS girls hockey team has consistently improved year over year since they returned to varsity play, and we're on the cusp of making the MIAA tournament with an 8-12 record this season. This talented group of girls will not graduate any seniors, and everyone is expected back next season for a run at becoming a tournament team. The Fishermen were captained by juniors Ella Costa, Abby Lothers, Brooke McNeff. Keegan Jewell was an absolute standout in her freshman year, leading the team in scoring. Kaden Cusimano was amazing in net all season. Expect big things to come from this fantastic group of young women next year and the years beyond. So, great job for our girls hockey team.
And then if I can share a few more just updates with the public. The committee has a write-up as Kathy said. So wrestling had his historic team for the program, produced 5 NEC champions. So that's our conference champions. JJ Figueroa Mercado, Aiden DeCoste, Joe Allen, Michael Toppin, and Jaden Toppin. In the states, state championships for both Toppin brothers, Jaden and Michael. And in the girls tournament, a 2nd place finish for Morgan Pennemead and a top 6 finish for Bailey Militello. So congratulations to them for great performance in states. Then there's all states, which is a bigger tournament. Jaden Toppin was crowned all-state champion. That's Gloucester's first all-state champion in wrestling. And then Michael came in 2nd place. And then both Michael and Jaden proceeded to the New England Regionals last weekend, where Michael came in 5th and Jaden came in 8th. That qualified them to proceed to nationals next week. So it's a really successful year for individuals and the wrestling team. The cheer squad, the cheer squad, had a busy few successful weeks. They've been performing at invitationals. They won the NEC championship, qualified for regionals, and now are competing this Sunday in the state championship. So they're the last surviving team in terms of state championships. Lots of teams that got there. Girls basketball finished 7-13. With more wins the past few years combined with a larger percentage of players returning for 23-24. So they're on the upswing as well. And then boys basketball qualified for the state tournament and won their first 2 games, and then fell just yesterday, I think it was, to the number 4 seed. So they reached, I think they probably reached the quarterfinals. And then indoor track and field also, boys and girls had very high quality performances all season. The boys were highlighted by Colton Rochford, finishing 2nd in states, 6th in all states, and 12th in New England's. Max Littman in the 1 mile in the mile race, 8th in states, and our 4x400 team finished 4th. That's Colby and Max, plus Justin Carlos and Bryce Rochford. And the girls were highlighted by Sky Sciolino, 6th in the 600 meter. She came in 8th place. Their 4x400 relay finished in 5th place at states. That's Sky, also Allie Spencer, Georgiana Callers, and Hope Castellucci. And then this week, the following student athletes are competing at nationals, so they're continuing on as well. Colby and Bryce Roadford, seems like a fast family. Dylan Smith, Heike Barbosa, Sky Shilino, Hope Castellucci, and Madison Goody, who are all continuing on to nationals. And then our swim and dive team was highlighted by Willowberry, and Sarah Fernandez highlighted in state, but they qualified for states. So just a really successful winter season. And athletic director Brian Lafada said that they were now gearing up for spring sports, and they officially begin on March. A lot to talk about in terms of good stuff.
I think it was strictly for 2 years.
Now they're letting me.
Yes, letting you know.
Great job. Great job.
Next item of business is the consent agenda. Does anyone have any items they would like to remove from the consent agenda? I would like to remove the executive session minutes that we can talk about next time we have an executive session. A minor change.
Which ones?
The one I emailed you about. Which one was that? I think it was 8.
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Maria, roll call vote, please.
Ms. Weason? Yes. Ms. Nancy?
Yes.
Mr. Melvin?
Yes.
Mr. Minio?
Yes.
Ms. Prince?
Yes.
Ms. Watson?
Yes.
And just add that we want to thank Lynn Beatty for her general. donation.
Just to clarify that those are rewards for completing the trip. And so that money needs to go. Thank you.
So I was concerned that it was Beatty's personal bank account. It is not, to clarify that. The travel companies, sort of bestow upon schools rewards for traveling with them. Those rewards went into Principal Beatty, her name. She's putting it back into reinvesting them essentially back into the trip. So my concerns were allayed. And it's very good use of the funds, obviously.
Not that I wouldn't want to generate.
No, you're a very generous person. It's true. It's really, they're being used for the basically.
Next item of business is deliberation on education issues and the superintendent's report.
Great. Full agenda tonight. Let me just bring up my presentation. I'll start, but we got other more qualified folks to do most of the presenting tonight for our topics. So let me just give a few quick updates. So as we know, every day matters here in the Gloucester Home Schools, and everybody belongs in the schools. As we say every time, we strive to and strive to support. So our updates. So just a couple things about O'Malley Science Labs taking a start here on TV. We already gave you some updates about the mass, the theater, our drama, performing arts, athletics. We already gave, but then also some more pictures of East Bet's tour for staff. Then Katie Provost here to give us our special education update. And then a great team from O'Malley to give us an update on the Learning Bank Parks and some of the work they're doing. So first and foremost, just to start things off, KPAN Today 1623 Studios recorded live at the O'Malley Science Lab on Friday, and interviewed 6th graders and 7th graders and 8th graders and science teachers and principal as well. Was a little nervous about it, but did very well. And Amy Donnelly, Dave Brown, also Maggie Rosa from the Gloucester Education Foundation represented GEF, because GEF is such a leader for us and really instigator for the innovation and the support from them. It's been great, and so they're now editing that, and they're going to show it across all their platforms. So can we access cable, but also the internet and their YouTube channels. And there'll be longer whole show, but then also shorter clips. But it's really, I think they did a great job. They were very excited to be there. Corey Kukuru opened it up, regaling folks with his experiences at O'Malley, which was very positive when he was there as a student. And that was amazed to hear about some of the stories. But anyway, just really positive press and coverage for Women in Science Labs, which is one of the strongest points of our middle school. So the photos is a crew. It takes a lot of people to put on a TV show. They had like 4 or 5 crew members plus the other 2 hosts helping out. There's 8th graders, there's James Tejeda, Shauna Castro. There's Principal Beatty being interviewed. And then we mentioned, Kayla mentioned the Midsummer Night's Dream. There's some photos of it. That's some Malia and Aiden and Elijah's group, Will Berry, all recognized for either their technical prowess, costume design, or lighting, or their performances. So really nice job. And just, our performing arts, actually it begins at the elementary schools, obviously, the bills at the high school are just really growing stronger and stronger, and more kids are getting involved. So it's great. Beauty and the Beast continues to this weekend. Then all 3 Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
Yeah, Friday
weekend?
night and then matinees on Saturday and Sunday.
That's great. Go early, folks. There's a big hockey tournament, so parking could be challenging. So go early, go often. Make sure you get a parking space. Don't park in the grass, please. But they've been doing a great job, and they're fantastic getting our folks over there to make sure folks know about it. There's the athletics updates, the school zone update. So want to update the committee on how the school zone update is we're carrying it out. After we came with some changes in the fall. So principals were really clear, and I supported in terms of getting these decisions made early on. So we did a lot of outreach with families. The families were affected, in the two zones that have been changed, really Beaman and Plum Cove. We sent emails. We had a family forum for both Plum Cove and Beaman parents. At Beaman School, we followed up directly with emails, phone calls, and text messages to families, those who we hadn't heard from yet, to help them make a decision to answer questions. Conducted school tours at both both Beaman and Plum Cove. And that was by the principals, and also our EL, Augustina Parsons helped out with those as well for families who English is not their first language, who speak Spanish and Portuguese. And then also principal called and emailed the families that are moving to the school as well. So and then we also communicated and confirmed with those folks who are staying at their schools. We confirmed with them by letter as well. So where we are, so folks have the option to notify us they would change schools. Of all the families, about 140 students total, impact across the two schools. 7 students chose to move from Beaman to East Veterans. So they're now zoned for East Veterans, and they're going to go to East Veterans. 1 student chose to move from Plum to Beaman, and 6 students chose to move from Beaman to Plum. So only 14 students out of all those are moving, which is great. We thought people would want to stay where they are. And the other piece is that all the families who requested moves can make them. You may remember that the 1st and 2nd grades at both schools, Plum and Beaman, are pretty full. So we weren't sure how it would sort out. It was possible for a lottery where if there are a bunch of folks who want to move from one school to another, there wouldn't be room for them. But it sorted out just fine. All the folks who requested a move have been granted that move, which is great. The next step is that school choice for kindergartners, and we decided and let families know in January. Those families whose school zone has changed and they have older siblings in the school already will be the top priority for school choice. Okay, as we've explained and worked through, can't guarantee those because we don't know which folks from the zone are going to show up and how many will be there. But it really makes sense to give the folks who have siblings there whose zone was changed to have the top priority of all the siblings. They get top priority already because they have siblings in the school, but they sort of be bumped even higher because the school zone was changed for them. Okay, so just want to update you on that, and that happens in August every year by your policy, because that's when kindergarten registration is happening. A lot happens now, but then there's a lull, and then it happens again in the summertime. So it's just that policy.
I just have a quick question on that because I forget the date that I know enrollment continues even after the enrollment date because families enroll.
Wait,
late.
what have we done?
Right, but if enrollment ends in August, when are you making the decision of the priority kids? The
Yeah,
top priority?
yeah, so we make that decision first week of August.
First week of
Yes,
August? Okay.
yeah, then that by the policy is very clear
Yeah,
about
I couldn't remember
that.
what time.
Yeah, first week of August.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I have a question? Sure.
So let's just imagine a scenario where a family decides not to move to their new zoned school. But then one of their siblings, upcoming siblings can't
Yeah,
move. Do you anticipate any problems? Or there not being space for the older kid to move to the new school district, or is that just a fluid transition?
it really depends on the numbers, obviously, you know, so. That means it depends on the grade of the classroom, and also it's moved out from existing schools, so it's hard to break that at this point. But we're aware that might happen, we talked that through it at the community, at the public forum there. Yeah, so it's something we'll pay close attention to, and we'll know ahead of time on school choice, you know, which families have the zone change. And we'll have that as a, you know, we'll be looking out for them.
Right.
And they also can know it. But yeah, that's a possible scenario.
And so there is the possible scenario that where the family would have to split. Because there wouldn't be room for one at one school and one at the other.
That's right, yeah, and you know, so I don't want to minimize how difficult that is, I'm not,
Right.
I get it, okay? And we have families for a variety of reasons who are in two elementary schools, or they're across multiple schools, you know, all three grades. You know, it's part of it, it's never easy, okay,
Right.
even if you have a, you know, high school, middle school, elementary school, or that's more by design or choice, right? It's complicated, right? But lots of families, you know, do it, and they make it work, and you can help them make it. But again, I'm not gonna say it's easy or prefer command. Get that.
So, my recall is that the date that's in the policy was kind of like, the last date, meaning it's do it by X. And I believe the policy, and in the past, we let the superintendent have the ability that if you had enough information with which to make the allocation of kids to accept them into their school choice earlier to alleviate any, you know, undue stress and, you know, uncertainty, that you have the ability to do that. If you have 10 kids sign up for kindergarten, you know, in each classroom at a certain school, and you know you've got siblings, our wish when we made that policy change with date, so we moved date, was that if you knew ahead of time, we would want you and the principals to tell those families ahead of time if we could grant their request.
So let me look at the policy again. I think of it as much more specific and directed than that. But let me check it again.
Yeah, it wasn't supposed to be,
Right,
like,
that's,
you can't tell until August 6th. That would be the last date you would tell them.
yeah, I'll look at
Okay.
that, okay, and certainly, I mean, I get the challenge families are, you know, potentially facing. And want to minimize the best we can and, you know, and following your policy, right? So I'll definitely look at that again and you know, clarify that. In terms of, you know, that's going to become like, you know, will, shall, may. type of-
Well, that's why I say I don't want to give any false hope that this still, we don't know the enrollment till the enrollment date.
Yeah, right.
And even then, we don't really know because people enroll late.
Yeah.
So I understand what Kevin's coming
Kindergarten
from.
tricky, you know, I mean, it is, but I'll look at that just to make sure I, you know, I'm reading it, you know, very, you know, to the letter and very accurately, and then we'll proceed, you know, yeah. No problem. And then latest tour, so Principal Matt Fusco and Assistant Principal Christy Lambert led a tour of the staff over at East Veterans again today. So some more updated photos on the left. It was hard for me to make this out at first, but this is the second floor of the building. Second floor.
That is the
Second floor, and you're in the entryway, above the entryway, I should say, and that's the laminate beams in the entryway. And you see that big clear story window out on the I believe that's looking to the front of the building.
And if you're downstairs, you'd be looking up.
Yeah, if you're down there, you're looking up, which is all the scaffolding has been taken away now. So what I heard from a very enthusiastic Matt Fusco is that it's pretty spectacular. So that's great. Forward to see that. On the right, is a room under construction.
That is an extended learning area. It looks like it's on the second floor. Yellow second floor.
There's the color themes are by floor, and we believe yellow, the
Oh,
yellow
no, that might be
tones.
first floor.
Yeah,
First floor.
And there you see more of the, not only the, cabinetry that's being installed, but also the flooring that's being installed as well. And, there is a bookshelf that is on a seating area right now, won't be there. But there's a window seat area there for kids to sit and read together and learn together, that sort of stuff. So just a few photos, but things are coming along, on budget, on time.
I was just gonna ask that. One,
Yeah, budget on time.
and I understand that, the custodians went in and toured in the last week or the week before. So
Oh, yeah.
the project team's been trying to get in the city side workers to get in.
So next would be Katie Provo, giving us an update on special education. You want me to present?
Thank you.
Make sure I've got the latest version. Katie Provo, our director
Okay.
of special education, is here to give us an update on special education across the district.
So hello. An overview of today's presentation. We will review the special education department vision or future state and our strengths and our community supports and services. And then review some district data and trends. So looking at similar data that we looked at last year and kind of seeing how is that data changing or trending in regards to percentages of students with disabilities and percentages of the disability categories. And then that's off here. And then I'll connect that to special education priority updates and those 3 special education priority updates. It's cutting off. a
And I'm
little bit.
gonna get out of this and pull up another one. Something happened.
It may look familiar because I used the same format on the presentation as I used last year. Thought I would stay consistent.
There we go.
Thank you, much better. So our future state. This is something that we've been talking a lot about in regards to our special education department vision and then the future state of where we want to be, Gloucester Public Schools. So just to synthesize, we believe the students should be educated to the maximum extent possible alongside their peers, and we want to create inclusive educational environments for students, celebrate their differences, maximize their potential. Through individualized assessment and progress monitoring, identify the appropriate supports and remove learning barriers in order to ensure that students are provided with high quality, meaningful education. We want students to be proud of themselves and recognize their future potential and become positive and contributing members of our society.
I'm gonna just add a couple things here. This is work this is really driving a fair bit of work that which Kate will talk more about, but just as today, for example, all the principals and district leaders, including Gary Frisch, were working at, digging into this and understanding even more, what it means for where we want to go and how we want to get there. The things that are already in place, because they, a number of things that are already in place that are happening. One of the things is, and Kate will show data on this in a moment, is just how much inclusion and how much our students with disabilities are included general classrooms, and it's a real strength of ours. And then also we're identifying things with our leadership team about, challenges and barriers that we face on an ongoing basis, and what's really important, we're really trying to stress very consistently now, is just the collaboration has to happen within a school, across schools and, across the entire district, around moving towards this. And really, so we have things in place, but we have also work to do. So we will share more about that.
So embedded within our vision are the following principles. We want all students are general education students first, and we focus on their strengths. General education and special education must work together, and that will connect to a later slide. And we want to ensure a continuous cycle of improvement beyond just compliance for the Department of Ed. Using data to make our decisions and making sure students are engaged, and we welcome parent, community, and student partnerships. Special education strengths. I keep saying how wonderful of a community this is. Their staff are caring and empathetic and really want what's best for students. The culture is collaborative, and we have a very diverse student population, which anyone that works here wants to be here with that diverse student population. That's very apparent. We're well staffed. We are well staffed for special education in regards to having supports and services for a variety of different programs, different disabilities, and those resources in order to meet the needs of our students. And then our district-wide programs. So we have some well-established district-wide programs within the district, which really help us to be able to support students in-house versus needing to send them out of district. And this is just a review of our supports and services, which shows how much we have in place already through special education. The disabilities that we work with, our team of educators and specialists, and then a list of our district-wide programs. And now we get into some data, reviewing the data and the trends and looking at what does the data tell us. This is a table that shows the percentage of full inclusion, partial inclusion, substantially separate, and out of district. That last tab is percentage of out of district over the course of the years. So when we look back at trends for where our full inclusion rates are and where we're trending, we can see that we were trending up until 2021. And then there was a bit of a dip. We've dipped a little bit back down in regards to full inclusion, but we are still, as you'll see on the next slide, above the state average. When we look at this data, we can see that our partial and a substantially separate have stayed pretty consistent over time. Our out of district placements, you can see they have gone up over the course of the last year into this year. And that really is a result of, we've had a number of move-ins that were already placed in out of district placements. I think we've had about 5 this year that were already out of district when we moved into us. And we've also had some students with more significant needs that we haven't been able to meet through our district-wide programs, and we've had to look at something more restrictive. You have a question?
I do, Katie. Two questions. One, is there any point here, full inclusion, partial inclusion? The word inclusion sounds great, but is there ever a scenario where over inclusion or could over inclusion not be a good thing? Does that make any sense? Where
It does. Why don't we go, if it's okay, we'll go to the next slide and I'll kind of talk a bit more about what each one of those mean. I think that you led right into my slide.
it's a good thing we talked before the meeting.
So this breaks it down into what percentage, I'll get to your question as well, but this breaks it down into the percentage of what does the placement mean. So when we go through the IEP and we write the services, those services add up to a certain number of minutes. So you're first looking at what's the disability impact, what are the accommodations and modifications and specially designed instruction the student needs, then what are the services they need, where do they take place? Do they take place in the general education classroom or outside of the general education classroom? And that's where, when you add up those minutes, it results in either a full inclusion placement, partial or separate. So full inclusion, you'll see is 80% or more, they're in the general education setting, but they are coming out, they may be coming out of the general education classroom to receive services up to 21% of their day. Partial inclusion, there's a range from 41 to 79%. They're in the general education setting, and then services are provided outside of the gen ed setting for 21 to 59%. So you can see that range. Substantially separate students that are placed in some district-wide programs. We do have a lot of students in our district-wide programs that are partial inclusion as well. Substantially separate doesn't mean they're always all day in a small group setting, not interacting with peers. It could be 0 to 40%. Each IEP is an individualized education program. That's what it's called. And so the minutes for what is included, where they're included or not included, is based on the data and based on the team decision as to what does the student need in order to achieve their goals and benchmarks, and where do those services need to take place in order for them to maximize their growth. So each of those decisions is made at the table with the team, and then that's how you get your placement. So to say, is there too much inclusion, too little inclusion? It's student dependent upon what do they need based on their IEP. Research does show that students that have full inclusion placements tend to have stronger outcomes. They feel more like they belong. But that is authentic inclusion for a student with high needs is not an easy thing to do. You need a lot of resources. You need to really be able to build that. It's not, so I don't, did that answer your
It
question?
does, and I think the key word for me there was authentic, like you can say, oh, it's all, so many percentages of kids are, inclusion is built into that. Well, I think the real key is that it be authentic inclusion, that those bolt-on services that go with that to support the kid, or the student, is really the value of it.
Just including a student for the purpose of percentages and inclusion isn't necessarily meeting the needs. It's about what's the authentic inclusion, and what does that look like?
And only because you spoke about it a minute ago, can I dovetail into a second question?
You sure can.
Okay. You talked about kids that are coming into our district that need special services. We're kind of up against it, or the cost of that plus transportation is a big item for the school committee, obviously, and it's transporting kids. But in that evaluation of a new student coming into the district, I mean, is it just kind of assumed that if a kid received, if a kid was sent out of district for services, is that the assumption when they come here, or is there an evaluation that says, well, maybe he doesn't need
Great question.
out of place?
Great question. If the student's IEP says that they are in a substantially separate program placed in either a public, or private, or residential, it's a legal document. So when they move to us, we follow that legal document.
Okay.
We then start to get to know the student. We attend the out of district coordinator attends the team meetings. We are part of the team writing the annual reviews and looking at data. And every year a student that's out of district, every year we look at, is the student making effective progress? What do they need for supports and services? And what do they need for placement? So that's a yearly decision that's discussed with each team. But if a student moved into the district and had the IEP, we need to follow that. Does that? So we don't evaluate and then send them out.
Right. There's no
If they
gap
already
there.
have an IEP that says this is where they're placed.
Yeah.
And it's varying needs. Various placements are for various disability profiles or various needs. I looked back at last year, and we did have about 5 move-ins last year as well that were out of district when they moved in. They were most of them were in the collaboratives, so it was a lower cost.
Thank you.
And when we compare ourselves to the state, So the state average for full inclusion is 67.2%, and we're at 73.6. So while we dipped a little bit this past year, we still are above the state average. This data is all from October 1st of each year. So the data gets uploaded and entered October 1st of each year, and then that's where I pulled it from. So it's consistent year to year. So this isn't today's data, but this is October of 2022. But you can see that increase. But when you looked at, just to go back really quickly for the out of district, just to find out our percentage of out of district for is 6.7 and the state average is 6.6. So we're right alongside with the state average. We're not significantly above that at all.
Yeah.
Thanks. This is 21-22 data. So this is the percentage of students with disabilities compared to our local area districts and compared to our DART area districts, which are demographically similar districts. There's a couple of new ones on the DART that shifted. Peabody didn't used to be a DART district, I don't think, but it is now. But as you can see, we are consistently falling above all other local area and similar demographic districts in regards to our percentage of students with disabilities. So the state average is about 19%, and we're at 25.4, which is a slight decrease from last year. We were at 25.6, so slight decrease. And this data is important for a variety of reasons. It's important because when we look at the amount of resources that we're putting into special education, into evaluations, we want to make sure that we are fully supporting all students. And 25.4% is a pretty high number. So it's not that we don't want to provide the services to students that need it. We want to make sure we are. There's just so many supports that we have through general education that we can meet students' needs with, especially with RTI, MTSS. I think you'll talk a little bit, that's a little bit of educational language, but the tiered interventions that we have in place in our schools right now are strong. And if we're able to support and meet the students' needs through tiered interventions before they go through for an evaluation, then if they're making effective progress, there's no need to move forward with an evaluation because we're meeting their needs and they're making effective progress. And that's really more of the goal, is looking at what can we provide for interventions and supports for all students and not have that fear of, well, if they're not on an IEP, they're not going to get their needs met, because we have so many things in place in our schools.
I think that's a crucial or a potential misconception there, is that a student can be identified with a disability, but that doesn't mean they automatically are on IEP or get services. Okay, because if they're making effective progress and they don't qualify, it's that combination of a disability and not making effective progress. So I think just to reiterate what Katie's saying is that with high quality tier 1 instruction and other supports, it's often that it happens that students won't be placed with additional services. But that's a folks often think that diagnosed disability equals education services. That isn't a direct correlation, or not sometimes.
My question is, do parents ever disagree with the term effective progress and really want more support? And how do you resolve those differences between what a parent's expectation for their child is versus some of the benchmarks that we might use?
So we have the program coordinators who all run the team meetings, and data is very important. This is why we're looking really closely at our evaluation and eligibility tools to ensure more consistency amongst when we have a referral come through for special education. What questions are we asking? What questions do we need to answer based on the referral? What is the suspected disability area? What areas are impacted? What testing do we then use to collect that data and look at where is the student? And part of that data we're collecting is the curriculum-based assessments and looking at the universal screenings and the progress monitoring data from the general education teacher. That's a big part of it. We're looking at that whole picture when we come together at the team meeting. It's not just one little area. So that effective progress I do have some data that I've shared with the program leaders around what does effective progress mean and what does it not mean? But it really is a combination of, and compared to, so their same age peers, are they making progress at a rate that is going to close that gap?
That was sort of the question, if you could just define effective progress and what that looks like, because my assumption is that public education doesn't mean maximum progress.
For
right?
special education, right?
And as a parent, I mean, you want your kid to make maximum progress, not just effective progress, right? And so I would
Mhm.
imagine that there's some discrepancy there. And in people's opinion on, you know, how well their kid can be doing or not. And so it would
So-
be helpful to know what the district defines or the state defines really as effective progress.
So I don't have the definition in front of me, but I can find it and share it with you all of what we have. It's really around when you're coming to the table to establish eligibility. Is there a disability? If there is, you ask, are they making effective progress? That's where the discussion will happen around the data. If they are not making effective progress, then you go to the next question, which is, do they need specially designed instruction? So then you're asking, what is the specially designed instruction they need? In regards to the effective progress, there are students that are, I can't say exactly how it's been running at the meetings, but I'm pretty sure that I know at the elementary level, we have our curriculum-based data. We look at the DIBELS, we look at the STAR. It's looking at in relation to the cognitive ability. So if their overall cognitive ability is lower, are they working up to their potential for their cognitive ability? If their cognitive ability is high and their achievement is lower, then they're not making progress according to what they could in regards to their cognitive ability. But you have to, there's so many different pieces of the puzzle that there is no one simple answer. You really have to look at multiple points of data to determine, are they closing the gap? I like to look at visual data. So seeing more of a trend line from the curriculum-based data as to, are they on target for meeting the benchmark? And what does that trend line show? Does it show that they're on target for meeting that benchmark by the end of the year? Or are they below? Or are they above? Yes. Yes, I just defined it, okay. So if they're on target for meeting the benchmark by the end of the year or exceeding, that's effective progress. Does that help? Yeah, the parents are involved. Oh, thanks. And it's part of the team decision, so the parents are part of the team.
And so in that sort of line, right, that trend is based on their cognitive ability. So it's sort of, it varies kid to kid. Or
We
is that very
always want-
prescriptive?
Regardless of the cognitive ability, we always want to be seeing that progress and seeing that trend line closing gaps.
And Kathy, you asked about what happens with disagreement. Okay, so let's get to that, because there's processes and.
So if the team disagrees, if the parent disagrees with the results or anyone on the team, if the parent disagrees with the results, they have the right to an independent evaluation. With our percentages, I don't know that I have not heard of a lot of disagreements in regard to whether or not they were eligible for special education. More of the conversations that occur are students that are already on IEPs and looking at, are they making effective progress once they're on an IEP? So it's effective progress for disability and do they need special education services? But there's also effective progress within the annual IEP and are they making effective progress towards their goals?
Go ahead, Laura.
So I have I want to sort of back up a little bit and understand the range of things that will be included in the disability.
Understand the what?
The range of conditions, the range of things that will be identified as a disability.
So we're gonna show you actually the Yeah, but building the
categories.
categories.
Oh,
I
okay,
think that'll be helpful.
so I'll wait for that.
Yep.
I think it's similar to-
Mhm.
Is this standardized across the state, these, categories?
Disability, yes, there is.
Yeah.
So there
when we're
is,
looking at this data with the percentages, obviously we have the highest on that graph. I just want to make sure we're using the same metrics.
yes, this is all data that's from it's put out by the Department of Ed.
Yeah. I mean,
And then
we're just
this-
using the same, litmus, whatever.
Categories, right, yeah.
Right.
Ultimately,
So they're comparable.
ultimately, it's a team decision. The
Yeah.
team makes the decision.
Okay, all right.
There are, the Department of, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act has rules around this. These are the definitions for educational disabilities
Mhm.
and what would qualify under IDEA for that.
Yep, we thought food service has a lot of regulations and guidance, special education is much more so. It's very, very highly regulated in terms of processes, the law, qualification, that sort of stuff, both at the federal and state levels. So, and that's one of the things, we want to continue to monitor is our evaluation assessment processes, are they both effective, but they also follow all, in compliance. And then the other piece is, I guess those are two pieces, and then obviously then our services and support having an impact. But those, it's the qualification, and there's the progress for students, so.
Okay.
So you mentioned the second opinion piece, so like they have the right to get a second opinion. I have some questions about that, but I don't know if you want to wait until after your presentation.
That might make sense, yeah.
It makes
that's-
sense
You
until
just
after.
closed out the presentation.
I know, because.
I'm happy to wait. I just, you had mentioned it, so I wanted to jump
Like
on that.
kind of how.
Yeah, I mean, we could. Okay, yeah, I don't want to ruin your flow too much here.
You're getting some questions tonight.
I am. It's all right, I'm ready. This is a snapshot of special education enrollment by age. So this was, again, October 1st, 2022, a snapshot of the number of students that had disabilities by age. So you can see, it's kind of interesting, there weren't any identified that were 5 at that time, but you can see that trend where age 10, which is around 4th grade, there is a spike. And another spike is age 16, which this is an unusual spike for being 16 and for this many students. So if this data would warrant kind of digging a little further and looking at why is it flowing like this, or looking at trends over time as to, do we see patterns in grade levels? Do we see that there's more students that begin to get identified in 3rd or 4th grade, where reading for meaning becomes so much more important than learning to read? And if they haven't learned how to read yet, then they're going to struggle even more, and that may be when they're getting identified. So it just shows, I thought it was a good snapshot visual. This is the most common disability category. So this is the trends for our local area districts and the DART districts as to most common, second most common, third most common. For 21-22, we had learning disabilities, LD stands for learning disabilities, was our most common, health was the second, and communication was right behind it as the third. So you can see kind of how we compare and how other districts are falling in regards to their percentages and their most common disability trends. I bolded ASD on here because I think it's important to see that while it's not our top 3 right now, it is a disability that is really becoming more predominant. It's becoming more of one of the top 3 disabilities, autism, in many districts. It goes along with the communication too, the communication disability and the autism. So we are working on programming with our students, and you'll see a little later on, but
You explain this, get a couple examples of health.
health, is most of the students that qualify under health, it's often ADHD that qualifies under health, but it could be a medical reason. Could be any type of health, but often students with ADHD and the attention and executive functioning, that's categorized under health.
Like,
I was concerned last time, I think, when you presented this information about the communication, it seemed like it was trending up.
Yes,
Has there been like a plateau?
so this is 22-23 data.
So
This was 21-22, and now when we look at 22-23, we can see that our most predominant disability category is communication. And that is, when you look back at the previous slide as to most common, it's not the most common in other districts. It's top 3, but not the most common. So there, you can see that ours has shifted. We still have the same top 3: learning disabilities, health, and communication, but they've flipped order, with communication being the highest. Autism's at 11%. There are a number of students with autism that also have communication disabilities. And if we were to look at what's the primary and what's the secondary, some of our students that have autism do have that disability category. Communication is their primary. So I think that is capturing some of them in this category as well. But yeah, it is trending up. The speech and language pathologists are seeing that trend at the early childhood level.
Yeah.
Especially at the early childhood level right now.
Yeah, good for your question, this is sort of speaks to.
Right, no, this is very helpful, and, you know, I don't know very much about sort of the psychology and the sort of diagnoses, but my question has to do with how these disabilities can be present in behavioral issues in a classroom. And how that impacts the entire classroom. You know, so again, I don't know enough about what it means to have a communication disability and how that impacts behavior. My sense is that some of these have quite a big impact on behavior in a group setting. So I'm just wondering if you would speak a little bit to, as we integrate, you know, as we work to have everyone together as much as possible, if there's also monitoring of how behavioral issues are impacting other students, the school, and how that, you know, what the interplay is there. Because as these issues grow, my assumption would be it's having a bigger and bigger impact on all students.
So behavior in and of itself is not a disability category. But like you said, many disabilities have the impact of behavior coming out because of the disability. So the behavior is all about communication. It's all about when behaviors occur, they occur because a student either isn't able to access, or they don't feel like they can access, or they're frustrated. So we are always looking at what behaviors are occurring and how we best supporting students and best meeting their needs in order to decrease those behaviors. The state of Massachusetts, and I believe across the country, is seeing a big, significant increase in behavioral and social emotional needs. When we look at what is our 4th most common disability category, it's emotional impairment. Emotional impairment may have externalizing behaviors, it may be internalizing behaviors, but we are having more and more students identified with anxiety, depression, various emotional disabilities, and meeting their needs can be challenging if we can't figure out the underlying reason why those behaviors are occurring. Typically, there's a lagging skill that is causing a behavior to occur. And if we can identify what that lagging skill is and put supports and tools in place and do some explicit teaching, then we can see the behaviors go down. That's the hope.
I don't know if that answered your question.
Well, I guess I'm thinking about the school as a community, right? And about, how we're communicating to the entire community about behaviors that may impact other children, other students as well. Obviously, given that the school is doing everything in its power to, to meet every student's need. But none of this is happening in a vacuum. So it's sort of a tricky question, like how, I know that you and the team are doing such a good job to, to try to find the underlying frustration or the underlying issue and meet that need. And I'm also wondering about sort of the school community that is exposed to those needs or to those outbursts, and how we work in both ways. Because I know firsthand that student needs are impacting other students directly. And I don't know how I'm not sure how you or how we as a community can work, with that understanding while we're meeting, sort of to meet all students.
I think, this is one of the most difficult things probably in public schools, and especially right now, so I'll just be clear, that let's be direct about it is, post-pandemic, we and every other school system I'm aware of is experiencing a higher range of I'm not sure what the right words are, but everything from dysregulated behavior, explosive behavior, and then also a real shift in what the sort of the baseline of what's normal, okay, what's sort of regular interaction communication. Okay, we see that across all grades, so that's happening. It's happening in our schools, and at the same time, and that you're absolutely, when a child has a significant incident, event, disruption, outburst, that can affect a small number of kids or a large number of kids, and that's something that's really difficult at that moment for lots of reasons. One is we can't. It's not. We're not able to explain to everybody what's happening and why it's happening, and or would we? And yet, people, kids are affected and learning's affected, that sort of stuff. But when that's escalated in the way it has right now, and our schools are really doing the best they can to sort things through. That's the folks at this table, it's the folks at that table, it's the teachers, obviously, it's our paraprofessionals, it's our bus drivers. It's not something that we can easily just flip a switch on. And I think it's a good question of how do we communicate that challenge to families, and I don't think we have any, I'm not going to stand here and say I've got the answer on that one, but because it's tricky business, honestly. We want to respect the privacy of that individual and that family, and at the same time, very clear it's impacting other people. It's not. It's more challenging now than it has been, and it's compared to it. It really is.
No, I appreciate that I clearly know there's no way to flip a switch.
Yeah, no, right.
Yeah, no, but I hear what you're saying. I feel like, it's a part of this conversation. That's all. Like, that's what I'm feeling, like dysregulated behavior, whatever the reason, impacts more than that.
And another piece of it, which most folks don't understand, or should they, but all of them should, okay, is that going back to the laws, students with IEPs, they're very specific laws, and they're different rules, laws for them in terms of how we approach them in terms of discipline when it's related to their disability, and their different restrictions and different processes because of that. Now I will never ever say that disciplining kids out of things actually is that effective, okay? But there are some tools we have with that we don't really have at our disposal with the kids when it's a behavior is related to disability, you know, it's a manifestation of their disability. And then folks don't know that, you know, and nor can we explain that well, other than what I'm saying right now. But that changes the equation a little bit, you know, in terms of what's at our disposal. For sure.
When you look at the kind of pieces of the pie with emotional and health in regards to our Gloucester district, it's more than a quarter of the pie, and that's often where you see the dysregulated behaviors with the emotional impairments and ADHD, where it's hard to regulate compared to the state. It's similar. They're a little bit less of the pie, but it's still about a quarter of it. So and it's when you look back to the slide previously, you see most common disabilities, how emotional health, autism, those are all becoming more of our common disabilities in schools. And they weren't 10 years ago. They were the disability categories that were the much smaller pieces of the pie. We have some really strong interventions for students with learning disabilities. We've learned a lot about about learning disabilities and what research shows that's effective for instruction. So while we still have students, we still have a significant piece of the pie for learning disabilities, I think we have a really strong handle on how are we supporting them, meeting their needs, and how are they making progress. Whereas students with emotional or behavioral difficulties, especially post-pandemic, it's a struggle for schools right now for all of them.
Yeah, that's a question. Can you go back to that?
Oh, yeah, sorry, yeah.
So in relation to all of these different disability categories, what if any are the limitations in our testing and actually diagnosing all of these?
Oh, you're getting really big questions at me, Samantha. So we should have the capacity to be able to conduct testing and come up with any of the educational disability categories. Autism, neurological development, any of these. We can give an educational diagnosis.
Yeah.
It's not a medical diagnosis. Oftentimes with autism or neurological, we can say it's the suspected area and it meets the educational criteria. That's what we're looking at when we're doing our testing and looking at what disability category does most fits the profile of the student. It's an educational disability category that then meets the needs for services through the school. It's not medical. So we are looking at what do we have for tools, what do we have for assessments, and how do we make sure we're maximizing and training our staff who do the testing to be able to have a repertoire of tests. We're looking at when we get a referral, we know, okay, if the suspected area of disability is autism, do we have the right tools to really be looking at that and then drive how we're developing the IEP in order to hone and focus on their needs. Specific learning disabilities. We've done training this year, which you'll see in a later slide, but we've done a lot of training this year with the special education teachers across the district on really understanding and learning how to score, how to administer, score, and start to interpret diagnostic reading assessments. So the CTOP, the Tower, the GORE, those all really give you the information you need in order to know is there an underlying reading disability.
Yeah, I guess like for things like health and social emotional stuff, right? Those are growing categories. And I could be completely wrong, but my assumption is that as a school district, we're not diagnosing depression or anxiety in kids.
It has to meet the educational criteria. So we're saying this meets the educational criteria, most of emotional impairment. We do have medical diagnoses that come in, depends on what evaluations have been done privately brought to the table versus what are we doing. So we are always looking from an educational standpoint, does it meet the educational criteria? So emotional disability, there is, for educational purposes, there is a flow chart of questions that we need to ask.
Oh,
So it's not if it depression it's more around,
are there emotional challenges that are
yeah,
getting in
that
the
are
way of
over
their
an extended
education?
period of time and impacting all areas. So that's really more where,
As
They
opposed
may-
to the medical diagnosis.
right, in the report, they'll do rating scales and they'll say that this is what the rating scales showed for where they're elevated. They may be elevated in depression, elevated in anxiety. Those are areas that we want to look into. And then do they fit the eligibility criteria and development?
But then if like somebody has a therapist at the table and they say this child has been actually diagnosed with, you know, X, Y, and Z, you take that into
Yes,
consideration.
yes.
I just want to push on that a little bit further, because we are a school and not a hospital, so, and I know the work that comes out of your department is top notch, because I talked to a lot of families that are involved, and I have never heard a complaint about our special ed department. That's one thing I can say in all the years being here. The families are walking away here happy and feeling heard and appreciate the services that go on in this district. If there's anything to praise Gloucester District, I mean, Gloucester Public Schools for, it's the love and care that we give our kids, especially through this department. But I just want to make sure, if we're going to start bringing up depression and anxiety and things like that, and I think you touched on it a little bit, is that we're not making those diagnoses. We're not trained to make those diagnoses.
not.
And we don't want to,
And we don't need to.
and we don't
for
need
under
to, and that's where we
eligibility.
would refer them to go to their doctor and get that independent.
But they.
I just want to be clear that I'm.
So we're
understanding.
not diagnosing depression, anxiety. We are saying, when we do our psychological evaluations, there's
Yeah.
rating scales that endorse certain elements, and anxiety might be, like, if you answer a majority of these questions a certain way, anxiety will be elevated. So that's part of the student
Right.
profile, that they're exhibiting that anxiety.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean we're saying we're not saying they have depression or anxiety or a mood disorder. We're saying these are symptoms that came up, and they came up across parents, parent rating scales, teacher rating scales. They're showing up across all areas. But then we look at what is under the disability categories. Do they meet the
Educational.
criteria, the educational criteria for emotional impairment? It's an umbrella term. Similar to, you may get a medical diagnosis of dyslexia, which is a learning disability. The educational definition of learning disability, it doesn't say dyslexia in educational. It says specific learning impacted, check the areas. So it's different than a medical diagnosis. And I think that does get confusing. I think sometimes parents feel as though they need to get that independent eval that then says they have a disability in order to qualify. If a parent submits an independent eval, we still have the right to do our own evaluation through our school system and look at what do they look like educationally? And what do we as experts see educationally that they need?
I just want to make sure that our messaging is clearly defined, that we're doing the educational part, you know, and because I don't want to give parents a false hope that we're going beyond that. You know, as far as the depression and the anxiety and things like that. So I see that as a line that, not that you can clearly draw it in the sand, because a lot goes on for different diagnoses. But I just want to make sure that, not make sure, but I just want to hear that our diagnosis are based on educational and not so much a medical, unless the independent medical evaluation is brought into the conversation at the table.
Correct.
Otherwise, it's
And
false hopes and expectations that can come from that.
The IEP that lists the evaluation results, if there's an independent eval that comes to the table or a medical diagnosis that's part of the eval, if we say we want a health assessment, getting input from the doctor is saying ADHD, so we have that information from the doctor that we're saying there's this is the disability category. We have documentation from the doctor, but it's all about what evaluation tools are we using to collect that data and putting it in education.
And again, they might have a medical diagnosis of disability. But then again, the other piece is are they making effective progress back to earlier conversation?
And do they need specially designed
And
instruction?
do they,
or related services?
yes, say that again?
Do they need specially, so it's the flow chart of eligibility. Is there evidence of a disability? Which category? If it falls into, if you say yes, then you go to the next question, are they making effective progress? I think that's where there may be some clarification that needs to happen on what is effective progress. But then the next question, even if they're not making effective progress, you then ask, do they need specially designed instructional related services? And then if yes is to all, they qualify for special education through the school system.
Thank you.
Does that help?
Yeah, it does.
So I'll try and be brief. I'll try and be brief on these.
Sorry, just a quick question. Does this include out of state, out of district placements, this data?
Yes,
Okay.
for disability categories, yes. Okay,
Now we want to turn towards the work we're doing to continue to strengthen this work.
and that's why it was the one animation I put in there for flipping.
Right. Yeah, there.
The work we're doing. So strengthening our special education practices and processing this. A summary statement around what we're going to get into in the details here. So the 3 department goals, the strengthening of special education, it's priority 4, are really, the first one is around strengthening and building consistency with our evaluation and eligibility processes. Looking at what do we have for tools, what do we have for the structure, what do we have for staff resources? How much time do staff need in order to complete the evaluations? How much time does that then take away, if any, from students receiving their services if they're needing to, if there are too many evaluations occurring? So looking at that, looking at trends for our eligibility data, and then in developing targeted professional development for that. So that really goes along with that professional development around, if we're seeing that emotional impairment is high, then we need to really look, which it is, and the behaviors are occurring, then we need to really look at our professional development needs to target around supporting with strategies and for behavior management and how to ensure that we're meeting those needs. I talked a little bit about the training already. Goal 2 is IEP program development. For this year, we're really looking at special education coordinators. We're doing consults and including case studies, looking at specific team meeting protocols. What are we using to ensure parents feel as though they're involved? We are working on creating a parent survey that we can provide to parents after IEP meetings to get their feedback and find out if they feel as though they understood what, the process and that their needs were met. And then we did have our tiered focus monitoring review from DESE. They had their on-site visit this year. We did our self-assessment last year. We are still awaiting the written results, but we did meet and there's 2 potential findings that we're going to need to develop an action plan for. One is our educational assessments and the other is our progress report writing. So looking at the data over time and are they making progress? And this is really around the strengthening of our instructional practices consultation and the continuum of services. So looking at our district-wide programs and looking at our autism program specifically and how we're building in additional consultation through the BCBA, through an AAC consultant, which is augmented cognitive communication. So communication is becoming a higher level of need, and we are seeing more students with autism, and having that AAC specialist be able to come in and coach and support our SLPs and the teachers is really been really helpful. We did have training with Jessica Minahan, train the trainer. She's the author of the behavior code. We had some psychologists and adjustment counselors and program staff that participated in that for early releases. Are you laughing at me?
No, I'm Bill Melvin, need someone to read.
And then the specialized reading curriculum. So the materials and the resources for making sure that we're able to support our students when they do have small group reading and they're pulled out of the classroom. Do we have the right materials and resources depending on their profile? So Orton Gillingham for learning disabilities. We piloted language this year in our learning center at the middle school, which is for students that are significantly below grade level for reading, and at the 900 level in the high school. So for students that are at least 2+ years behind. And then the final is this is the kind of epitome and most important of all the work. It's connecting general education and special education. It's priority 2, so it's not priority 4, but Amy and I are working together with a committee of an amazing committee around looking at inclusive practices, looking at what do we have for resources, and really making sure that we have processes in place to look at our tier 1 instruction, our interventions. Are we targeting and meeting the needs of our students? Are we providing the right professional development? Did you want to chime in at all?
The work we're doing with that committee is amazing. We have representation from all grade levels on the committee. They put together a survey and the teachers sent it out, not us, to their peers. And we have just recently analyzed the survey, and I'm excited because they're identifying specific areas that they want professional development and where we can make some changes and support them through inclusive practices and those kind of things. So there's some teachers that are really stepping up and, taking a lead role in this work. So it's nice to see and giving us direction of where they need support.
And that's, I think, where the shifts are, the things to pay attention to here, in terms of work we're doing, all as laid out in the plan for improvement is we work on curriculum instruction, and then we work on professional development related to tier 1 instruction, so the instruction that every kid gets every day. But then these other pieces to professional development, non-specialized instruction. So you see the last 3 bullets as Katie talked about, and then the resources we've put into our BCBAs, board certified behavior analysts. Through ESSER money doubled the number of those folks we have. Those are folks who are highly trained, professionals on really understanding student behavior, and then consulting with our staff and our principals on strategies for changing student behavior. And they're a great team. And then RBT, so that's behavior training, behavior technician folks, and that's training that we'll do more with our paraprofessionals. The AAC is let's give a quick shout out. That's on the communication devices, and what we see, and that's training that hasn't been done before on a large scale. We've done it with a lot of special education and parents as well, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
and I can jump in and so so she's going in, we have somebody coming in and training and modeling and working with the students on the AAC devices, and we've started a new tier 1. It's called LAMP. So it is a certain program that goes on the iPad. And we're really seeing that as the students are learning more functional communication, their behaviors are going down. Because they have language, they just don't have a voice. So we are seeing some really, I would love to get parent permission and show you some videos of some students, and I think that they would be excited to show it as well. But we have some parents that are really excited, saying that their students are using the devices at home now, spontaneously. So that's a tool that we're providing students that's really, we're seeing a big impact at a young age.
So, and then one last piece, and then also the training on the evaluation assessment. So I'm trying to verbalize, a great job, which is, we're having experiencing where parents and students are having a difficult time because the student doesn't have the communications with the AAC devices. But 2 things happen when we help our paraprofessional or teachers use those devices well, is the kids start helping the kids use them. As Kate described, the kids then can communicate what they want to, and they're having more success. And then, of course, the adults have more success as well, because their whole purpose, right, is helping this child, and it's been difficult. So that's whether it's a specialized reading instruction, whether it's the behavior consults, whether it's the AAC consultation, learning that whether it's the training on curriculum, on tier 1 curriculum around wisdom, or at O'Malley with their the new BLA curriculum. Is that?
Don't give it away.
Oh, sorry. Those are pieces that are underway. I'm not going to say it's a done deal, but they're underway and they already are making impact. It's make it more successful for students, and therefore more success for our staff. So those are the things that are really starting to shift. And I feel like we're paying close attention to the needs of our students and therefore needs of our teachers. You know, to try to sort of wrap some of that.
So that, were we talking about students that can't actually vocally communicate? And my son mentioned something, he was amazed, like he said, there was a student that had a device he could
You're at
communicate
West
with, that's what you're
Parish?
talking about?
West Parish?
Yeah, he was amazed. Yeah.
No, I've been getting videos, I've been getting messages of happy tears that like, well, you know, students that are now going after just about a month of instruction. They're going to the device, they're voicing single words, starting to put two words together. So when you see that that language is there, it's the language is there, they don't really have the ability to explain it.
My son mentioned that, like, you know, they would make outbursts, like vocal, like, you know, like they couldn't, I'm like, they can't communicate, can you imagine how frustrated they are? You know, like, and then he was just like, man,
The consultant that we have coming in would love to like even go into classrooms and like have the students try it and show,
Yeah,
like she feels like that's really powerful to see. And you have them kind of learn that of how to use the device.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
Other questions or?
I do. Sorry. So I promise all my questions previous to this were all organic. This is the only thing that I sort of prepared, and I usually try to send them to people beforehand, so you can absolutely say like, can I get back to you on this? That's not a problem. I'm really curious about the role of neuropsychs and outside testing in the evaluation process. In my role as a social worker and being part of many IEP meetings, 100% of my clients all felt like they needed a neuropsych. I hear it a lot amongst families. There's two concerns there for me. That there is a lack of trust or a lack in our testing and our ability to sort of diagnose or recognize, you know, anything that's coming up for kids. And two, the equity in relation to that, because not everybody can afford neuropsych testing. I do realize that in the state of Massachusetts, the district does have to pay for additional testing or second opinion if they qualify. That's my understanding.
So for an independent eval?
Yeah.
So the independent evals, yes, we would pay for it, but there's different rules and laws around it.
Yeah.
So
So
I have it in the
I
policy.
know that there is a way for families to access that, but again, there's only so many people providing neuropsych testing. Insurance doesn't cover it. There are so many
So this
wait,
is,
the
and-
equity issues around that are infuriating to me.
and this is why we really want to look at, do all of our schools have the same tools? Do they all have the same training? Do they have the training in which tools they need? And because we want to really, and what referral questions are we asking? I think if we can at the very beginning talk about, here's a suspected area of disability, here's the questions we want answered, and then have the evaluators be able to be more targeted and focused on answering those questions and knowing what they're looking for in the evaluations.
Yeah, and I think I would imagine that it creates a really sticky dynamic between schools and families if they're bringing in testing from a neuropsychologist and the school not
So-
necessarily always agreeing with what's being said there. And so I guess that's the piece too, that I would imagine there's a natural, I would guess, a breakdown in
Could be,
communication.
there could be.
Yeah.
We really need to have our own data and look at our own data. And oftentimes within a neuropsych, there are patterns that are similar, but not always. So we always, when a student's on an IEP, we always consider the results of an independent evaluation in part with our evaluation results and look to see, is there anything that we're seeing that's in the evaluation that we need to consider and add? I don't know if that answers your question. I can get into. the equity piece, I hear what you're saying with that. Yeah, do you have it?
So you don't have to have a neuropsych to get an IEP.
No, I know.
So that's not necessary, but I don't think families do that. And I think families sometimes have a misunderstanding that if they have a neuropsych, it's like a ticket for an IEP, like a prescription. That's not always, because a neuropsych might say the child has dyslexia, right? Dyslexia is a very broad term. So then that comes to us and we do some additional testing to, verify or go a little deeper or whatever. And it might find when you go through that flow chart that yes, they have dyslexia, but they are making effective progress, right? So they don't need an IEP because our tier 1 instruction or interventions are strong enough that they're making effective progress. So, but I think part of, and in priority 4, we do talk about some, in priority 2 as well, about teaching parents about the interventions that we have in place and how we can support students without just getting that magic IEP that has that myth of it's going to fix everything. Oftentimes it helps a lot, but it's not always the golden ticket, right? And so the neuropsych isn't a path to that golden ticket because that's not what it is. And I think there's some education in the community to know that. And so for parents to feel that they have to go out and pay all that money and get on a 6-month wait list for a neuropsych is kind of sad. It's not an equitable issue. If they have concerns, they should reach out to schools. There's a process in place, the child study process that we can go through and work with families and explain to them the types of interventions and supports we can give each student individualized to either go through the road to get an IEP or to go through the road of just better supporting a student without an IEP because maybe they are better supported with interventions that we can give to all, right?
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of community education on
I
that
think it's a
because
state,
it is.
it's a state thing. I mean, I think it's across the state that
Yeah.
families feel
Yeah.
like, I don't think it's just Gloucester, so.
Oh, no,
I
it's
think
everywhere.
Very clear.
It's
that
everywhere.
It is absolutely something that I think is a trend, across the state.
If we have strong tools and everyone knows how to use those tools and assessments, and we do a thorough job of looking at all the components and being able to report that out, that's how we establish that equity and establish that trust with families and ensure that, is this what you're seeing? Is this what it's like, looking at the whole picture?
So what I'm hearing is that if you're a parent who has a child in the thick of this subject, you get information, right? And if you don't know all this goes on with other families, right? You may know about it, but you don't know the process. So it sounds to me, when you say people can get information, it sounds like we should figure out how to do a parent information session, no matter who comes.
But we're doing
We're
that,
not.
right?
Well,
We
we've
have
tried
to
to
do
do
that.
Yeah, and
But
part of
my
that,
point is that, looking at colleges and things, you can look up any information. You want to know
We-
about how to do
we
housing,
are
you
working
go and
on-
you look at ABC step. Is
Yes.
there some presentation that people could access themselves?
Yes,
Right.
so we're
Like you
working,
just explained to us beautifully. It would be nice if that was a document or a presentation
So it-
as a starting point.
we are working on creating a document within the special education manual that has live links to resources. We're also working on, go ahead, Amy.
so beyond the manual, which is very helpful, but that committee that we're having that's connecting regular general ed and special education that we talked about. One of the things that came out through the survey is an MTSS, the multi-tier system of supports, right? And first, having a better understanding what that means in our schools, because in all of our schools currently, it's implemented, at different levels. In the elementary levels, they've been doing interventions for a very long time, right? So the MTSS is really stronger in the elementary schools. Middle school, they're going to tell you about the amazing things they're doing in a few minutes about integrating some multi-tiered system of support, right? So we want to, as a district, have a very firm hold of that and then do that outreach, community outreach, and have a website that talks about it, have some information that a parent might have, all of that to educate that. We want to first unify where we are as a district. And that's coming out of the work that we're doing at Connecting General Ed and Special Ed. You're absolutely right. It's needed and it's coming. Not fast enough, but it's coming.
I would love any advice or any advice or ideas on how to get parents together to be able to, like we've tried through the CPAC to have some parent nights, and we have a speaker for executive functioning that I booked for this week for last night. Was it last night or the night before?
That's right.
And had 3 parents, which was wonderful to have 3 parents, but we want to have more. So ideas on whether we could put it in the newsletters that we have an executive functioning speaker. It's open to all. Any CPAC presentations are open to all families. It doesn't just, you don't need to just have a student with a disability.
But also,
Everyone
a lot
needs
of parents don't even know what executive function is. So,
True.
you know, I think there's 100%, like, how do we make that a little bit more accessible? Because every kid struggles with executive functioning, every adult struggles with executive functioning.
And a different title would
We could all
probably be
use it.
good. We'll have
Right.
a different title.
I mean,
of
yeah.
How do you support your student with
And is it all-
organizing?
Yeah,
Is it
if
all-
you
And
did
doing their
organize,
homework.
how do you mean you don't?
I think that's a great suggestion, though, having a different title. How
Yeah.
do you support your student with
Yeah,
following directions and cleaning their room and getting their homework done?
but the one last thing I want to I shared this with Ben, but the MTSS piece of the work that we do is so incredibly important, but parents are not being informed even when their kid is getting pulled out. That's truly not
Like
happening.
intervention?
Yeah.
When they're getting intervention, because remember, interventions happen either in or outside the classroom.
That
But it's not intervention,
Or
right?
just at all,
Yeah,
like,
right, right.
like if
They don't-
there's a reason why your kid is having an intervention. That's not necessarily getting communicated to parents. And so what's happening is they might not realize like, oh, we're already doing we're already
Right.
implementing, we're already recognizing that we're seeing some lagging skills and here's all the stuff we're already doing. They might not find that out until a parent teacher conference a couple months into the school year. So I think that's part of that communication is like, hey, we recognize based on this benchmark testing that your kiddo needs a little bit of help in this area. So here's what we're doing about it, like
I think
from the
that-
beginning.
I think part of that is, for our elementary schools, it's like normal way of operating.
Yes,
So you don't actually, in formula, normal way of operating, but it's very helpful for families to
Very
know,
helpful.
that we see this concern. And because of that, we might, we are doing X, Y, and Z.
Right.
yes.
And that's something I think.
And it is a normal way to tell it at parent conferences, just like you said, but that's
Yeah.
November or October, it's end of
Yeah.
October, right? So that is late.
It is
But it also normalizes it that it's, students go into intervention and come out of intervention. It's just what they need.
But I think parents
Yeah,
would
that's a good
definitely
point.
really appreciate knowing when we're doing the good work.
All right. Okay.
Thank you very much, Katie.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
For questions.
Are you raising your hand for another question?
I was, if I could just make one comment, I'll save it, I'll save it.
Don't stay late.
We share.
I'll save it for another.
Thank you for your helpful questions.
All right,
Thank you,
Very
Katie.
much. And I took some notes while it makes sense.
moving along.
Just so folks know, I thought this was gonna be the longer presentation, okay?
So now you're-
Yes.
So now you need to give me more time next time. Probably have to come back. Perfect.
Do another one. Feeling it. All right. You're welcome.
Would one of you be so kind as
I'm sharing it, sorry.
Waiting for some responses, Lieutenant.
I thought you wanted a break. All right, here we go.
Great. Okay, well, thank you all for having us. I'm pleased to have Kate and Jess here to accompany me. They are really the stars of the show tonight, not me. We're going to talk a little bit about our current strengths, some data that of what we've accomplished so far as to mid-year. The testing reports are from January testing. We'll talk about professional collaboration and some student engagement things that we've been working pretty hard on that are going well. So we'll start with The strengths, our literacy focus is where I get to make the big announcement. We successfully completed 3 pilots, 3 different products this year, Wit and Wisdom being one, Amplify being the second, and Study Sync being the third. Unanimously, the staff selected Amplify as the chosen curriculum product. And kids, majority of kids were also in favor of Amplify. There was a significant segment that chose one of the other programs, though the reasoning that came along with that was that it was the easiest. So we chose to say, okay, then maybe that's really not our priority. So this Amplify was found to be, well, Kate will talk more about that, so I'm not gonna take that away, but she'll talk about the strengths of the program, why it was selected. But we're very pleased to have done that. And we're now in the implementation phase. The staff got together last week and identified what's needed for implementation. And they're really excited to get it going on that. Social emotional support is an area that all of us have been working on quite hard. We have 7+ I think, different classrooms doing pilot trails curriculum, which is a K-12 curriculum that everyone's taking a look at. And in addition to that, our adjustment counselors are phenomenal. So the combination of support from our counseling staff, the curriculum that's coming in, and we'll talk a little bit about next steps that we're planning for the fall that will contribute to that as well. Our STEM and critical and creative thinking, we've had some really dynamic things going on in the Science Center recently with aquaponics and stream tables. I know this is later on in the presentation, but I'm sort of bursting. This week we had GMGI in doing DNA separation with the kids. And so they had, I got it in front of me, I can't even remember the word for some sort of gel.
Electrolysis?
No, it's not quite, well, the word's here, so you'll get to see it. So they are taking specimens and separating out to identify the different DNA and make predictions about how breeding would happen and what the dominant traits would be of whatever it is they're working with. So this week they were learning how, and next week they get to work with recently passed fish, the aquaponics project. So I was in there seeing kids, do you realize that kids don't get to do this stuff? And of course, they're middle schoolers, so they look at me and say, yeah, so there's no clue. 20 years from now, you will realize how amazing the things you got to do in this program were. So that's pretty exciting. Our PACE program continues second year. Our PACE teacher is phenomenal, and he's begun not only just working with kids who land with him, but floating around, connecting with kids at all times. He's integrated some educational components, increased the reflection opportunities kids are having there. So it's been a really welcome addition to how we address student behaviors. Arts, we've already spoken about the musical that's going on. Our band is now 145 participants. They're integrating with the K-5 kids. If any of you were at the concert recently, it was amazing to see how respectful and enthusiastic and supportive our middle schoolers were for the younger kids that were there performing. And we just have a really exciting program. I'll be talking chorus with Carlos and Phil from high school to get that back into our program for next year. And finally, it's just overall growth. The leadership team's focusing on the community culture, the learning, and how we continue to make strides with everything that we're doing. Just as a reminder, we have 3 focus areas, and that's what we'll be discussing tonight: the improving student learning, working on student engagement, and professional collaboration. So all of these are critical aspects for us. So we'll start with professional collaboration with a picture of some teachers working in the 3D print lab on the November Professional Development Day. And these are just some of the things that we've got going on that have been really helpful this year. So the first thing, which you'll see in a minute, is we have articulated our statement of instructional focus. That was one of our goals that came out of the system of support with the state. And our instructional leadership team is focused on teaching and learning, and they spearheaded the work on that focus. Our teacher leadership advisory this year is focused on the community and culture aspects of the student engagement. Our math curriculum team did sort of a parallel, but more targeted articulation of a vision for math. So one of the first steps in their implementation protocol was to make sure that they were all in consensus about what our vision is for math, to inform how they're selecting and looking at materials and deciding on a program that will work for them. As I said, ELA reached a unanimous agreement on Amplify, and our house teams are continuing to focus on student success plans, community meetings, things that really help students integrate and feel connected to the school. So this is our statement of instructional focus that was derived from looking at over the past few years and the direction that we know we need to go in. What are the very key things that we want to make sure that everyone has at the tip of their tongue? So we wanted it to be not a wealth of things that are spread out so much that people can't focus on them, but really to identify, here are the 3 things that we're going to do all the time, and everything that we do is going to focus on. So it's first using data in a collaborative way, and that's at data teams, it's curriculum meetings, it's at house meetings, it's at the leadership teams. We are continuing training with universally designed instruction. We work with Katie Novak again this year. Hope to do that again next year, and integrating practices into instruction that help more kids access and have voice and choice and build connection to what they're doing. And the final part relates to a lot of the math and science work that we're focused on, which is critical creative thinking, problem solving, being able to follow those iterative processes that are so important in science experimentation in the labs. And then finally, literacy for all of our kids across all subjects. The instructional leadership team in particular found what happened was we worked on this loosely. I sort of had a vision and we facilitated, Kate and I facilitated at the ILT the discussion of what we would want to have included. They came up with a really close draft statement to what Kate and Amy and I had come up with. Then the whole process then went to faculty, and faculty took a look at the goals we've been working on and put their input in, came back to ILT. We determined that the statement that I just read fit what the faculty was interested in, what ILT came up with across the board. But one of the things that came up in addition was that we wanted language, because the next step is to really integrate students into this. So if this is our instructional focus, what does that look like for students? How do parents understand what we're trying to accomplish? So this is the language that we will be spreading, so it's pervasive throughout, just like our sales values. Everyone knows what those mean. The next thing is for everyone to know and understand our instructional focus. So it's about collaboration, having voice and choice, thinking critically and creatively, problem solving, and practicing reading, writing, speaking, and listening. This should be in everything that we do. So I'm going to turn over to Kate at this point, who's going to give you an overview of our data and what's happening with instruction and intervention, instruction in all classrooms and also intervention.
Thank you. So we're going to just start with our student achievement and growth in ELA. As Lynn mentioned, we had 3 pilots this year for our English curriculum. And, that being said, we didn't necessarily teach the same standards we would normally teach at this point in the year, because we were trying different units from different programs that addressed different standards. But if you go through the slides, we are seeing some steady growth, but we have an upward trend at this point in the year. When you look at the red bars in comparison to the blue, which is great. At our data meetings, we actually sat down and looked at the individual standards to see where there was growth in specific standards and identify priority standards at each grade level. Now that we've selected a curriculum, we have certain standards we're going to have to go back and make sure we address, because they haven't been addressed in the programs that we've gone through so far. So we want to make sure that there are no gaps
So our teachers have already looked at that. They've identified what they need to teach next. And the new units that they're starting with in the new curriculum are the units that will address those standards that we still have yet to teach. So our hope is that these trends will continue to go up by the end of the year. So hopefully when we come back in spring, we'll see even higher red bars in the meets and exceeds. So yeah, if you want to go through, we have a similar trend in grade 7 with the meets and exceeds bar continuing to go up, and our not meeting bar is going down. Grade 8 has a little bit of a plateau, which we're looking at. Something to note: the meeting and exceeding is lumped together. The number of exceeding expectations did increase from the meets, even though they're the same level. Historically, if you remember the MCAS scores in the fall, when we presented those, the grade 7 scores were lower. So this really isn't a surprise. But as we go through launching the new curriculum, we're definitely spending a lot of time looking at those standards and making sure that we're getting the kids to where they need to be.
Is this the group that would have been 6th grade at the beginning of COVID?
So they would have been, I believe, in 5th grade when everything shut down. So they would have started middle school and the whole pandemic setting coming back. So I do feel like that grade in particular was impacted just with the transition of coming to middle school and quite a different state of affairs. You can see from the growth too, the way we separated this out, basically, when you're looking at student growth, you're looking at how students' individual scores improve over time. And so you're comparing, or giving the student a percentile score based on how their growth compares to other kids who have scored similarly or have a similar trend. And we're basically looking at the trend of kids' growth from spring of 2022 to this winter when we last took the test. And so when we look at that, we want average growth is between 40 and 60 percentile. And so that would be the typical growth. And so these are the percentages of kids who scored typical growth. And then accelerated growth would be anything above 60%. And then of course, low growth would be below 40 percentile. And so that's the percentage of students who have low growth. And that of course is something, we would like to get our typical and accelerated growth above 80%. So there is some work to do, but I feel very confident now that we've selected a curriculum. And when I talked to you about some of the features of Amplify that we were looking at specifically, really to address the needs of individual kids, I think we'll see more growth just from our tier 1 instruction being reached up to this new program. All right, so our plan going forward, we're improving student learning and literacy, is that we have started this new Amplify program. We just started implementing it after break. But in addition to that, we also are continuing our literacy intervention class, which was new last school year. And within that program, the students who've been identified, they are using the Read Naturally Live program to work on reading fluency, which will in turn help with their comprehension. And then the student will get into that later, but students are progress monitored, and it's for 1 term. So 1 of the quarters, they're in that literacy intervention class. We have ongoing analysis of STAR 360. That's our benchmarking system. When we have our data meetings, we really look at like I said, the individual standards. And then we started conversations about what do these standards look like? How do we teach them? And then, now that we have our new program, we'll be able to look and see how those standards are taught through that program. It's very exciting. Through our professional development, we have gone through Read Naturally Live training, not only in our intervention classes, but also with our special education staff. We've had tons of training with Amplify. Literacy across the subject area continues this year. I've done a lot of training this year with our keys to literacy strategies. So with all the content area teachers, we've looked at main idea strategies. We've looked at how to take 2-column notes. We've done top-down webbing. We've done quick writes and how to integrate quick writes into curriculum. So kids are writing much more across subject areas, which will help improve their writing fluency. And then we've had Katie Novak came for Universal Design for Learning. And we actually, when she did she come twice or
Just once this year.
just at one time? She was, yes, I feel like I've had many sessions with her this year. She has done a lot with literacy and Universal Design for Learning. So we figured rather than layer something else on top, we would integrate all the literacy strategies that we've been going through and talking about how that fits into Universal Design for Learning. And then part of the professional development is that we belong to the Tiered Literacy Academy through the state. And it's there are sessions for Amy and Lynn and myself to attend as leaders in the building. But then also I've been attending coaching classes, which helps me bring those strategies back to the teachers of all the content areas. So it's been very exciting. This is just the first year. Part of the instructional vision and focus came out of this academy. That was part of one of our first things that we were doing. And then part of what I'm doing through that academy is also looking at our data protocols. So, the way we run our data meetings and how to make them more efficient and more targeted to really look at, okay, here's, a standard that's not performing as well. What can we do specifically? Here's some strategies to help improve it.
This is the first year of the MTSS Tiered Literacy Academy is a planning year. So the rest of the staff has not been involved in it yet. But what we're looking at is the effectiveness of the assessments we're using, effectiveness of the data that we're selecting to look at, different ways to look at the data, not just achievement or growth, but typical growth grouped with accelerated growth. Those are some of the suggestions we've gotten from them. So we're really trying to make sure that we're looking at all the information, appropriate information, most helpful information, and in a way that's beneficial for us to implement changes.
So you actually just fed right into what my question was, and this, forgive me if I don't know this, but have coaches been integrated into middle school? The way that there are coaches.
We have one giant coach.
Right, so that was my question. Are you? She is the queen.
Not giant size, but
No, I hear that, because I know from years past, one of the ways that the elementary schools leapt forward was through coaches, is my understanding, right? And bringing in coaches on, the different levels. And I know data meetings at the elementary level are with coaches, so, you just sort of brought in coaches, and that's exactly where it was. So is there a thought of bringing in your one person? So I'm wondering where the thought is on bringing in coaches, or, the levels are still not where we would want them to be. And as that was such an effective strategy in the elementary schools, is that something that's being considered, and where is that?
So a couple of things that make a little bit different than the middle school. One, coaches, in addition, they play a lot of roles. One role they play that was hugely important and is hugely important. It is they and the principal, they tell their partners on focusing on instructional improvement. That's what and so when there's a school committee on Kate's position, and what I'm talking about is Lynn, because O'Malley has not had that partner. Okay, and then the team hasn't had that role. Okay, there's that leadership that can, sort of activate the other folks, this is principal, on supporting just what we're talking about here. None of this stuff was not I shouldn't say that's what I'm saying. A lot of this has been going because of the addition of Kate and her role, and so. And that includes, more focus on database instruction. That includes focus on interventions. That includes the curriculum, reviews and now, pilots and now, adoption. So, and the reason, and we haven't with the coaches, just to answer the good question directly, but there's different level of capacity around instruction at the middle school than the elementaries, whereas you have teacher teaching multiple subjects at the elementary, you have specialization at the middle school, and you have a program leader as well. Okay, so the program leader plus Kate, plus Lynn and some of the assistant principals, can really serve that function together. Plus, you have an instructional leadership team as well, which is leading a lot of this work. So I don't think it's necessary to have that level of coach, that specific roles of coaching, because you have a different structure, a different approach to specialization.
So 100%, and I'm no expert in all the different levels, so I don't pretend to be. And when I look at the school, when I look at what percentage of our students are meeting or exceeding expectations, it's below 50% in everything, as far as I see. So, and I know that's exactly what you're working on, right? That's exactly what you're here to tell us about what you're doing. So I'm just thinking sort of the history I know of Gloucester Public Schools, especially.
I think it's really appropriate for the school committee members, yourself, or to ask what else or what more.
Right.
And part of that what more honestly is taking ESSER positions on the operating. In our budget, we've already showed you, but as we go further along, a lot of the positions, the majority of positions to move from ESSER to the operating budget this year are all million positions.
Right.
But those positions are, we already have the crucial instructional one in the operating budget, but that's the PACE teach, which you talked about, which is a real sort of behavioral, cultural, position supporting students, right? And how long we integrate. It will be the assistant principal following year. But there's also sort of emotional learning allows us to do that as well. One of those positions.
The two interventions.
And
one of our special education learning center teachers. So those are the 4 that are coming, we hope, onto the background.
So those are some of the
So it's
pieces.
all related to us.
That can cement a lot of the work you see up here that the team's talking about.
Yeah, and to jump into like one of the things, with our scores being where they are, is that we didn't have a consistent tier 1 curriculum. So having consistency across the grade levels and having consistent strategies from class to class is hugely important to be able to see the growth and for to have the kids truly understand and learn. So, in terms of our plan and going forward, now that we have this literacy program, the really awesome thing is that all our English teachers were trained in Wit and Wisdom. So when we selected this, we know that this fits like, Wit and Wisdom can kind of transfer right into Amplify. We know the language that was used or is being used at the elementary school, the different strategies, and we know we've been able to see what is kind of taught at each grade level. So we had this great background and really felt like there would be a nice transition with a lot of consistent approaches. And then now that we have this new literacy curriculum in place, we can take some of the writing, graphic organizers and strategies and bring them to the different content areas so that they're using the similar approaches in science class and in social studies class. So, we're excited to get that work going. It's not going to happen this year. When you implement a program, the implement phase is at least 3 years just to go through that phase. But, I think I've heard it's, more like 5 years before you actually see like a huge difference in scores going right up. But of course, I'm hopeful that we're going to see them change overnight. But yeah, in terms of why we chose Amplify, some of the most exciting parts of it that our team and our students really liked is that it was designed specifically for middle school. As we know, middle school kids are a different breed. They're my favorite. I have always loved middle school. And, you know, the fact that it's designed for middle school, their online tools are very engaging. There's a lot of apps built in with the program, but there's also a fully paper version too, because we know that, you know, sometimes kids just have too much screen overload. And so all the texts are available in paper format. So some questions can be online, but if kids want to highlight and annotate in a paper text, we have that option available. The texts are engaging, they're appropriately challenging for middle school students. They're given rigorous tasks that really get the kids thinking critically and going back in the text to find where they, you know, where that answer is in the text, but also what clues might help them infer an answer. There's explicit writing instruction built in. There's direct language standards taught, and our probably most exciting piece is the embedded differentiation and support. So kind of following Katie's presentation, you know, as we're looking to meet the needs of all kids, you know, we find that any kid is struggling with a certain type of prompt. The teacher has the ability within the program to, you know, decide what level of support that student needs, and all of a sudden on that student's screen, a sentence starter might pop up. Or maybe it gives them a little hint as to what paragraph to go to find the answer. If they're writing a paragraph, maybe a little graphic organizer pops up. And then also there's a challenge piece to it too. So if the kid is ready for more, we can add, you know, enrichment to it as well. And the kids all have, it's different. Nobody knows what they have in terms of their level of support, and it can change on the spot. If teachers see the whole class is struggling, they can turn it on for everybody. With our implementation process, we just launched this curriculum, like I said, a couple of weeks ago. We are still in the training process. We tomorrow, actually, I'm going to be training all the ESPs on how they can support the students with this new program in the classrooms. And then we'll have a training for our special education teachers on the 21st, I believe. And then as we, you know, look forward to next year, there'll be a lot of professional development time dedicated to really unpacking this program and, you know, how to best meet the needs of our kids using it. We also need to have coordination with our K-5 teachers, and, you know, looking at, you know, is there, you know, we know Wit and Wisdom, they don't necessarily know Amplify, and then also looking at GHS and if there's, you know, different, you know, vertical things that we need to take care of.
Yeah. Are you finding that the texts are both diverse and inclusive? That's one thing that I loved about Wit and Wisdom, I continue to love about Wit and Wisdom, and I brings home conversations.
Yes,
And
and that
they're
was
very clear
Mhm.
that they're reading very diverse texts.
Yes, and that was one of our priorities in terms of looking at curriculum. So
The English department at English teachers at really wouldn't have it.
Good.
It's just something I can say, but we're just on this. First, I'm very excited about this. Okay, so I'm going to try to contain my enthusiasm for a moment. But so a couple of things. One, some similarities and some differences with the implementation, taking on the ELA curriculum at middle school versus elementary. Okay, one similarity is deep teacher involvement. Okay, which is, you know, from the very beginning designed, you know, with that in mind, and because it's crucial to only level. Okay, I also love obviously the student involvement, which really was different at the elementary. The difference is the pace, you know, in terms of taking it on. Folks rightly asked us last year, why the heck would you take 3 years to take on a curriculum at the elementary school? Okay, good reason for that. We explained them to you. That made a lot of sense. But here, the pilot was fast, still did 3, you know, not as deeply, but that was okay. But still got a good sense of what they were, and the students did too. But because it's just English teachers, we can actually start then, as Kate just described, taking it on this year for the in terms of implementing, you know, whereas we're having multi-year process. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Particularly because all of the English teachers, every single one was part of the pilots. So it wasn't a question of a couple people doing one thing or another. They all did all of the products and then, so they all experienced it. So it makes it a somewhat easier transition.
And it's really crucial. Because the
Yeah.
ball involved, where at elementary, we can't have them all involved, no. So this year we have a lot more folks involved. And then the last group will be involved next year. So anyway, just similarity of teacher, inclusion, collaboration and leadership on it. Supported really well by administration, Kate, Amy and Lynn. And now we're moving ahead.
And stuff.
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah, it was great. Well, the last piece on this is, I'll say is that there's a lot of values for having a common curriculum in a subject area at the middle school. And high school too, but in middle school, another one is the community of practice. It's one thing for teachers in the same grade or same subject area to talk about the work they're doing and the teaching they're doing and the struggles they're having. But when they're not teaching the same things, it's a good conversation and really helpful. When they're teaching the same curriculum, that goes to a whole other level about talking, communicating, thinking about their practice, just strengthening it, working together, strengthening it, that has just benefits in lots of ways, school culture, but also benefits the students because their practice it sort of builds on each other. So that's not often an obvious benefit, but it's a huge benefit. We're really excited that the team and teachers are taking the step, really big step.
And they're excited about it.
Yeah.
To watch Kate and Steph lead the group and have the thoughtful discussions they had about whether, literature and teaching and instruction and homework and all the things that, you don't always get excited to hear. And to go last week and hear about how excited they are to implement, and they were, asking questions like, how are we going to support them with professional development? And they're putting in their calendar a day in the summer that they're going to come in for a training, and they are ready to go. And it was led wonderfully by Kate and Steph, and I'm really excited to see where it goes, and Lynn too.
Yeah.
Give them credit.
And I want to publicly thank that whole English team because they did so much work. And to learn one new program is a huge feat, but to learn 3 and then implement them with fidelity and switching gears and helping to make it seamless for the kids and make sure that the kids are getting the best out of the curriculum and out of the their day. I was super impressed by everything that they did.
They worked incredibly hard.
Now we'll brag on it.
Yeah, so we ready for math? Try to keep it short. Okay, so math. Again, similar trends. We are going up in our data. Not as high as I would like to see it going up at the midpoint in the year. So this is 6th grade. And then let's see, 7th grade, and then 8th grade is very similar. Our percentages are a little off because of the rounding with the 10th. I should have put in the numbers to the 10th, but what this is showing us is that our curriculum that is currently in place probably, it's something that we need to look into, which is why we've started the math curriculum review, because we want our scores to be higher. And so this is really, an indication of our tier 1 curriculum needing to be strengthened. So we can go on to the next slide. Which again, similar trends. This is our low growth. 8th grade is showing very low growth at this point in time. So that's something that we're focusing on. At our data meetings, we have pulled all the standards reports and looked at the standards to see what are the upcoming units that we're going to teach and how we're going to change things to try to get it so that the students are meeting those standards. But really it does come down as to what we're using for, I think, the curriculum, which we'll talk about as we get.
For both ELA and math, when we implement a new program, like Kate said, it takes a good 3 years for it to take effect. What we might hopefully will see sooner is the growth change to typical and higher, right? They might not meet benchmark as fast as through implementation, but we want to speed up the growth. So that's what we could maybe look for it.
And one thing to
Can
like,
I ask a question for that before you want, so how are we monitoring that? Because that's been a question I've been thinking about since you've been talking. We have our benchmarks, but where's the accountability to get to the benchmark?
So
As opposed to waiting another year, you know what I mean?
you want to take it?
yeah, so we give that STAR 360 is 3 times a year. We give it the
Yeah.
September, January, and the end of the year. And then we do, there's the unit tests through the curriculum. And in this case, Big Ideas is what we use for math. So they give the test, they look at the test, did the kids master the standards, what didn't they master? Then they go back and they might, do some extra reteaching, they might group the kids different ways to, focus on different skills and then, reassess them to see if they've mastered that standard. So, it's something that teachers will do constantly, the progress monitoring through their instruction. Unit test is more of like a bigger assessment, but they do, formative assessments daily, just to check to see how the kids are mastering.
And we have the support for our teaching staff to do that.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
It is a lot,
right?
and so that's something, obviously, when we're looking at improving student learning, one of the things, we were talking about coaching. We do have our program leads and, obviously I'm one person, I can't go to every vertical team meeting at once, but we usually pick where is it I'm most needed, where is it Lynn is most needed. But I know that Michelle Bailey, our math department lead, is really good at bringing an instructional strategy, whether it's building mathematical thinking. She'll bring it, she'll have some sort of article, she'll have the teachers try it at her meeting. So she kind of takes on that coaching role through that vertical team meeting. So it's neat through the math curriculum review committee. We do have representatives from every grade level. And so, all those, questions are part of, what we've been talking about. And then they go back to their curriculum teams to involve everybody to ensure that there's consistency in how they're, teaching and reteaching. And whatever program we end up going with, there'll be more professional development that goes along with that. So it's going to be a long process.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
So yeah, our curriculum review for math is underway. We are following the implement process, which is, the first phase is to learn as much as you can, digging deep into what's the history of the math curriculum at O'Malley, how did it get chosen, digging deep into our data, looking at what's currently in place for practices, and then coming up with our priorities and parameters for selecting a curriculum. Through that process, as Lynn mentioned, we developed an instructional vision, which we'll show you on the next slide when we get there. And that will kind of drive our whole process in terms of where we want to be, and clearly where we are now isn't where we want to be. So whatever we select will be going through that lens, sort of the first filter. This year, we implemented our Tier 2 math intervention class. So this is in addition to having the general education math class. Students are selected based on their STAR 360 score, teacher recommendation based on classroom data. And, we looked at MCAS at the beginning of the year, but they will go to that Tier 2 class, and in that intervention class, they use Freckle, which is connected to STAR 360. So it pulls the data from the benchmark, and then it goes back and kind of gives kids extra support and extra practice on those different skills. And then there's a lot of interactive instruction in that class. The kids are in there for one term. We reevaluate using data at the end of the term to see how the kids are doing. If they come out, lots of kids come out, and then a whole new group comes in. And then to follow up on a question earlier about notifying parents, I email every parent, and I use Kimbo, so they kind of get a double notification. And then, a lot of parents will, respond back, thank you so much, or we'll end up having a conversation as to, in more depth as to why a student was placed in there. But we do try to give every parent that notification and conversation. And then in terms of professional development, we've been really exploring, like we mentioned, thinking strategies that Michelle will bring to those vertical team meetings. We also we're going to start a book study on building thinking classrooms in mathematics. And Amy was gracious enough, I think we bought them for everybody on the team and anyone who had wanted them. And then the universal design for learning that the whole school is doing will benefit math. And then I'm part of the DESE implement team with Lynn and Amy and Michelle. And that's all meetings collaborating with other districts in the state who are going through a very similar process. So the next slide.
Teachers asked for that book study.
Yes.
It was either you or Michelle brought one article from the book and they said, we want the whole thing. And I said, well, I'll get it.
Yeah, which goes into like when we developed the instructional vision, we didn't just like come up with it. We did a lot of research. So I brought parts of that book. We looked at articles. We dug deep into the Massachusetts state framework and what the state says good solid math instruction looks like. And then we actually demonstrated vertical learning surfaces and went around and wrote on the wall. We had like special paper that you could write on and wipe off. And so what we ended up coming up with once we did our research, went back and talked to the math department. We also opened it up to our special education teachers and our L teachers to get all stakeholders involved. We were able to come up with the statement of where we want to be with math instruction, which is that students engage in mathematical thinking, collaborative discourse, and reasoning, and problem solving in order to develop a deep understanding of concepts and mastery of skills to grow into independent and curious learners. So this is more specific to math, really focusing on, looking at there are several different ways to solve a problem. We're not going to just, focus on one way, but I'm going to tell you how I came about solving mine. And then, Lynn's going to tell you how she solved hers, and we can, collaborate and figure, out that there are multiple ways of doing things.
So just to,
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Do you still have advancement?
yes. One of the things that we'll look at through the review is how the students are placed in different levels for math. And taking a real solid look at the way that we compact the curriculum currently and whether there's a benefit to switching to a model that keeps the kids more horizontal in terms of concepts and skills, but goes deeper. So in other words, expanding horizontally when kids are at the different levels as opposed to moving them faster through the curriculum. There's some questions about whether the fact that you move kids through multiple books and at a faster pace in order to get them to have the whole curriculum so that they can take Algebra 1 in 8th grade, whether that's the most effective way to do instruction. And many places choose not to do it that way and spend more time deepening the understanding, more extensive number theory, for example, as opposed to going farther ahead with different topics. So that will be taken into consideration as we.
Because it also impacts what they take. So,
Yes.
or what they're able to.
What they can be successful with, so they may take the course, but not have the depth of understanding that supports them as they get into the more sophisticated math courses at high school. So it works for now, but we want it to be sustained, deep, retained learning. So just as an overview, as before we continue, the curriculum reviews are about the tier one instruction. So that's making sure that all kids are receiving instruction with curriculum that is provides equity, provides access, allows the flexibility to meet different kids' needs at different times. And that's the focus. You heard Kate talk about amplifying the benefits it has. The technology tools do help significantly with regard to being able to turn on a dime in the class and make changes and change what the kids are having access to. The second piece, which we'll talk about in a minute, is the response to intervention. Those are the two interventions we currently have, math and ELA, and we're planning for moving into SEL in the fall. So as part of MTSS, it's not just literacy and math, it's also social emotional learning. So that'll be our next phase of entry in the fall. And then finally, the scaling to maximize subgroup growth, including special education and a lot of these things. For example, the Read Live tool that we started using in intervention for literacy last year is now being used among all of the grade levels in the special education academic support. So we've got a tool that we found that worked, and now it's being expanded so that there are more students that are taking advantage of having access to an effective instructional tool, specifically for fluency on this one. This is a refresher, Kate's mentioned it, the data teams are still going strong. We have incorporated special ed teachers and invited them to those meetings this year, and the L teachers as well. And it continues to really serve us to have STAR 360, have classroom data, to be looking at STAR in particular, gives us information about individual standards, and that's really, that analysis is really what impacts, what can impact what we're doing with kids to target instruction. One of the things that came up this year was our weakness previously with nonfiction texts. And some of the pilot materials that were used focused on nonfiction texts, and our kids grew with that. So it's exciting to be able to see, to identify something that, you know, isn't working currently, to put something in place that has that instruction involved, and then to be able to see progress for that really quickly.
Alright, this should be hopefully very quick because I've already talked about literacy and math intervention, so. Basically, we have them for both classes. The average class size is around 8 students, some are a little smaller, some go up to about 12 students. There are 30 to 35 students enrolled per grade, per term, and per subject, so. Students take their intervention class as a specialist class. They still go to their, music class or their PE class, or art or whatever else they have scheduled. But they do go to the intervention for a 40-minute block 6 times a day, or 6 times a week on that 6-day cycle, not 6 times a day. We select the students in a similar process for English as we do for math, but I explained how we look at STAR data, we look at classroom data. We notify the parents. When the students are in the class, we progress monitor them using the STAR 360. We also do additional literacy assessments. We use the DIBELS for the literacy intervention. So we do the oral reading fluency and we do the maze. With the math, I believe there's a little progress monitoring through Freckle. And then
Some of the teachers are also giving an additional STAR assessment. For example, like they this week in grade is doing a sort of a mid-trimester, I guess. Administration of the STAR. So they had the early January, now they'll have up the mid-March to see how things are going, so that for the rest of the year, they know what to work on until June.
no, sorry. And then we talked about kind of what we do in each of the different classes already, but another important part is that the teachers of the intervention conference with the kids and kind of talk to them about what their focus areas are, kind of give them a success plan, and then at the end of the term, they go over sort of that decision, like, okay, you're ready to graduate out because we've seen growth on these specific skills, or, we've seen growth on these skills, but we still want to see growth on these skills. So we're going to stay in one more term. So, letting the students be part of that process as to why they're there and what their focus areas are to help them grow. The good news is we've seen growth, not as much growth as I'd like to see, but part of that is through our MTSS Literacy Academy. We're going to be using some of our resources there to really focus on what is happening in our intervention classes and to really make sure that we're maximizing the growth of those kids when they're in there for that one term, and hopefully only keeping them in there one term. But we're looking at, the green bar is the intervention class versus the blue bar is the students not enrolled in intervention. So that bar is higher. I'd like to see the green bar be above 60 because we want more of that accelerated growth. from that class. And then if we go to the math, we can see that if we're looking at I'm just comparing the average to the median. It's two different types of looking at it, but the math intervention class is seeing that growth about 60.
Trying to add something, to look at as about accountability. So here, what you see is, there's different levels of growth between math and literacy intervention, okay? The math interventionists are really following with great fidelity program that they're following, that they're, you know, that they're, and the techniques they're using, they develop. And literacy is not doing that as much. Okay, so the accountability comes in noticing through the data, what's happening here, why isn't, you know, the growth where we want it for literacy, and then work with the teacher to say, you know, what's going on, are you doing this? Okay, we've got to do this, you know, more fidelity, we've got to really stick to the program. So that, and that accountability comes from Lynn, comes from, you know, paid supporting, and that's happening well, but first noting the data and following it with the adults. That's all, you know, the team's work.
That's my last.
Our next section is student engagement. We're going to turn over to Mr. Vestito. Thank you.
So my part is next. So student engagement, and there's just a few slides on this, but when we think about, you know, student engagement at the middle school level, it's maybe the first time that, you know, we're truly asking kids for voice and making some decisions. And the good work, hopeful good work that we do at the middle school is going to capture, you know, and invite and continue that engagement at the high school level. The elementaries, I'm sure there's some of it, but, you know, depending on the age and grade, you know, it's mostly adult driven, some student led activities. This year, and, you know, the last few years for that matter, we really put an emphasis on, you know, student voice and involvement. So here's just a list, and I'll just go down them with brief descriptions. If there's questions, you know, feel free to ask about what, you know, we have asked students to do, or students have asked of us to have them have more voice in. And simple things to dynamic things. So recess choice. COVID kind of changed a lot for us with the way that we held recess. Some of us really liked those changes. The kids didn't, for the most part. So we surveyed the kids, and essentially what the kids wanted to do is go back to being with their entire grade for lunch and recess. COVID forced us to, you know, keep kids away from each other, separate, so on and so forth, and cohorts and whatnot. We liked it for a visibility and a safety level. Kids, for the most part, didn't like it, except the ones that don't like noise, and we're dealing with that in a different way. So sixth grade still, is that true? Sixth grade? Yeah, sixth grade still is split by choice. 7th and 8th grade are together by choice. Dance guidelines is also a new one. COVID ended our dances, or suspended our dances, I should say. You know, we've had 2 dances this year. The Halloween dance is always heavily well-attended costume. It's fun. We needed to set some new parameters and guidelines to, I'll just be direct, to avoid the chaos. Kids, parents, teacher complaints, so on and so forth. We got considerable student voice, and we're fortunate in the sense that their voices often echoed what we had hoped they would say. We had some behind the scenes guidelines, and then some things that we obviously, you know, weren't willing to part with just for safety. And for the most part, the kids echoed all of those things. We had one, the second dance last month, not as well attended. It was, I don't know, what was it? Winter theme, spring, something. It was confusing.
There were still a lot of kids there.
Yeah, actually, yeah, Ben was there, that's true.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there were.
yeah. The photo booth was a big hit. So then obviously Kate, you know, and others have spoken specifically about the ELA curriculum, but kids had a voice in that. You know, I can't think of another example where kids, you know, have had that much of an impact on curriculum, you know, not a unit that we might teach in a classroom or a topic that we might talk about, but high level, you know, this is what your year is going to look like.
They'll have some input into some of the structures of schedules in terms of 40 minutes versus 80 minutes based on this year compared to last year. So
Yeah. which is nice. So it'll be interesting to see, what the current 6th and 7th graders, think of it over the next couple of years. The 8th grade, they'll move on, but we'll keep track of it and keep asking, but it's that piece is exciting. Sales council is something that's not new to us, but new group of kids. Some kids have done it in the past, but it is, obviously our messaging and what we embrace as a school community, and kids are pretty regularly coming up with things that embrace what that acronym stands for. And it's again one of those examples where kids are having the ability to have a voice and a say, and it invites them to school. Often it keeps them there. Sometimes it's an after-school commitment that their initiative has spurred, and it gives them an incentive to come. So this is more, I think, probably in maybe the parents that are on this site council, but 2 8th grade reps on site council, which I think is fantastic. So similar to Kaya, coming on, Marbella's coming on, these 2 8th graders who are, mature and have the ability to have a plan, follow through, listen, be heard. It's they came in as leaders, but they're learning leadership skills, and in high school, hopefully that will continue for them.
Yeah, we just started this at the last meeting. They were on the hot seat almost the whole time. They handled it. So, because everyone at the table is looking at them for advice. What do you think? So we're working through the handbook. So they've got a lot to say. It's awesome.
We have 2 student reps on the principal search committee. Those 2 kids our students were elected this week. So one of them, they're both 7th graders. One of them is in the play, which our first committee meeting is Friday afternoon. And I had said to her, I said, remember, no is an appropriate answer. Like, you do not have to do this, but here's what it entails. And she looked right at me and she said, I can make it work. And it was like, all right, like, great. I'm like, you do realize like it's Friday and then you got to go right to the place. She's like, I'm good. Don't worry. So I conveyed that to her mother, and her mother's like, oh yeah, that's how she is. So, I think their insights, in the day-to-day business of being a kid on that committee is going to be invaluable. So community meetings is the next one. So Dennis Hurley, the current 6th grade assistant principal, has brought this from a previous district he worked in. But the idea is simple, and it evolves and it's flexible by its nature. But community meeting is meant to have student voice. It's meant ultimately to be student led. And it talks about things within the house setting, and at times maybe grade level or the larger community. But it really is to echo the good things that the kids are doing. It's not meant to be, unitive conversation. We try to do those in different settings, not as large. So the 6th grade has had some good momentum. 7th and 8th, we're getting there. But I think the kids see value in it, and I think the teachers, while some hesitant at first to take the responsibility away and give it to the kids, I think we are hopefully starting to see some of the leadership within kids come out. The next one is Cherry Street Journal. Kids were very influential in creating a website. So I don't know, it comes out, the journal's on
Whenever they decide.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I thought. I didn't think it was bi-weekly or monthly.
We revamped it this year, though. We didn't have a Cherry Street Journal on the website. And they worked with a couple, actually, the teachers had access and they gave them the access and they created the whole thing. And they're constantly in conversation about what needs to be updated on it. So
Yeah, there's incredible excitement, and it's the journals. It's middle school. The articles are funny. They're like mostly well written. Like the kids did it, and it's the topics are interesting. So
Can we see them? They're on the website.
Yeah, they're on the website.
if you go to the front page of the O'Malley website, there's a link to Cherry Street Journal right there.
We're gonna keep this on. I think I can share, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I'll just bring it up quickly. Just keep going, Jeff.
hold on.
Took
I think
away his.
the screen. I think the next one was the Yeah, oh yeah, that's right, thank you. Yeah, so student MCs at our student-led performances, so band concerts, the kids led it completely. Carlos was there, but no one saw him. I think he might have been in the sound room. Oh, thank you. And, you know, the band is spectacular for one. So just to be there in their presence and their talents is amazing. But then to have the kids be introducing one another, and the one that happened last month, there was some, you know, like dad jokes in it. And it was good. The kids got the ability to kind of step out of a classroom, you know, traditional classroom setting, and step up and be heard. And it was really fun.
Just.
Learning to lead.
Yeah,
I'll
good,
just
yeah,
show
sorry, yeah.
the charity journals up there. You get it just by from the O'Malley website, just go down a little bit, but it is filled with all those things.
Yeah,
Great
they've got quite an
picture.
elaborate menu structure that they've set up.
It's fantastic.
It's a great little website, so.
And then the last one on the slide, so Learning to Lead is a student leadership conference. It's at the end of the month in March. The middle school version is at Essex Tech. Ben brought it to our attention, you know, last week. So there's going to be 15 O'Malley kids in all 3 grades, 15 total, attending. So it's, you know, really meant to develop leadership skills. It's meant to, and it's an interactive workshop, not just, you know, adults talking to kids. They're going to, you know, be involved heavily, hopefully. And the idea is, you know, it's decision making. It's making choices about, you know, today that'll impact your future, and so on and so forth. So the APs have been going around, the guidance counselors help to pick kids. And it's, you know, again, it's similar to the principal search committee. They're like, I don't think so. And then we give them the information. They're like, yeah, I'm into this. So we'll see. We're in the final stages of, you know, reaching out to families to get confirmation that, you know, on permission, and then the transportation piece. And like I said, it's at the end of the month, so that should be exciting. So student engagement within the context of community culture and restorative practices. So again, the sales council, you know, deals with that very topic. You know, they're less on the academic side of things. They're more on the, you know, social, emotional, and the things that we do as a community that makes communities, you know, really good. Lynn had mentioned earlier the trails SEL pilot, so advisory and trails. So advisory is, again, like talking to kids about making good decisions. At times it is talking about the bullying, you know, curriculum that it's mandated, but the intent always is to become more organic. There's a curriculum, but it's conversations. It's having kids comfortable having at times difficult conversations, but also hearing your peers, being able to listen, but potentially disagree, have those discussions, and, you know, start to understand, you know, what it is to be, you know, a citizen within the, you know, our school community, but what it means in greater scale. Community meetings again, so the Cracker Jack Award, just like, you know, in the Cracker Jack box is, you know, a prize within, right? They give out, you know, or we give out to Cracker Jack Awards to kids that have like really excelled, you know, shown tremendous growth. And it doesn't have to be an academic thing. It might just be that they're just doing something, you know, out of the ordinary that is really appreciated by the staff or the kids. You know, we want to make sure that they get recognized for that. This year, 6th grade did a team building day or humorous days by house beginning of the year. Strong emphasis to build relationships with kids like on day one. Right, that's not new, but I think coming out of COVID, you know, kids have been so closed in, staff too, for that matter. Really getting to know our kids as soon as possible in a deep, genuine manner. Makes all the other difficult work, curriculum, content, testing, you know, that, you know, the teachers, staff have to do that much easier. So this was a lot of like, you know, project adventure light type stuff, not any of the high element stuff, but the ground stuff. You know, collaborative work, problem solving, things like that. Spirit Week is on the horizon. That includes which has always been very well attended, the faculty student dodgeball game. So the grade level that wins the student on student dodgeball games then competes against the staff.
We're ready.
So I know this is being recorded, but I don't think the staff has ever. Just, I don't know where I'm going with that, or where I want that to, like, but they've never won.
Are you on the team?
Maybe,
I signed up for crowd.
yeah, so there's that. So essentially what this is, traditionally it came out of our March Madness, kind of student-led, student-centered initiatives, which are week-long after-school activities to get kids that otherwise aren't part of an after-school program, to stay after school and, make connections. And I think the kids, once they really understand that they're gonna be throwing dodgeballs at staff, they're like, I'm in, where's that, pretty easy to get their attention. The next one, house decorating contests, kind of start as a holiday thing. No, it is a holiday thing. And some houses, really taking it very seriously. And, it is, we appreciate that the fire department hasn't come through in those weeks. Because the walls, the ceilings, the hallways, the lockers.
We did have to take down some decorations the following day this year because they set off the motion detectors. So the alarm went off. There were too many snowflakes floating around.
So, but yes, at the end of it, there are, awards, but I really do genuinely, I'm not just saying this, I genuinely think there's a piece that it's about that, but it's about the recognitions and it's about the teamwork that really the kids, we hope, are doing. Staff definitely gets involved in it, but the sixth grade especially, they're a pretty particularly competitive group as adults. And I think the kids just absorb that naturally.
Healthy company.
Yeah, they were impressive, quite impressive. So this next one, I could talk for like 3 hours on it about how impactful it's been for us in a positive way. And it speaks to some of the stuff that's been brought up earlier, actually, which is nice. So PACE, right? So alternatives, consequences. So really what that means, like in a nuts and bolts kind of scenario, is like we're suspending kids less, right? And if that's all we did is just suspended kids less and put them in this room, like that's a gain, right? But we're doing considerably more. So Jude Seminara is the sole instructor in that program, special ed backgrounds, and behavioral background. And loves it, like loves the challenge. And it's challenging work. It's oftentimes the kids that are coming into these programs are being kicked out of class, right? They're no longer, or I should say it this way, they're disruptive enough to their peers for a sustained amount of time that it's making a negative impact, right? And the piece that's essential, there's two pieces really. There's the self-reflection piece when the kid is ready. Because if you're like, you need to self-reflect now and they're irritated, they're going to get a very irritated response. There's no self-reflection. But once they've calmed and are in a safe space and feel that that room is a trusting space where they can work and get what they need, the reflections that come out of it are fairly insightful at times, right? So yes, on paper, we have a reduction in suspension, which is all well and good, right? The state likes that, all of that. Again, if that's all we're doing, like we look better statistically. But kids are in school, meaning they're not being sent home, right? They're, for the most part, actively engaged in their learning while it's mostly independent, right? Jude is, like I said, special ed, and he was a previous history teacher, so he's got plenty of backgrounds with teaching and helping and all that, the supports. And then it's, if, a teacher's available, or if like one of us needs to come down and just do a check-in or, some restorative piece, they're there. You don't have to wait till the next day or 5 days or try to get the parents to come in to, do this big to-do meeting. It happens more fluidly. And, we are seeing considerable impact in, granted, we still have plenty of behaviors, but we're seeing kids go, calm down, and be able to leave and reintegrate into, the general ed classroom a much faster pace than we would if we were suspending them outside of school.
Can I just say one quick thing about that?
Yeah.
There's two things that I think just speak to the values of Gloucester Public Schools, right? Because we're doing this program is one, like, every kid is a good kid and every kid has a hard time, right? Like, that's just a value base, like, you're a good kid having a hard time, period. And just because you're having a hard time doesn't mean that you're kicked out of the community or that you're isolated, and that your feelings are not scary to us, and that we can help you work through those feelings in a safe, contained place with a trusted adult, and that we're not gonna push you away because of those big feelings. And that to me is like, that's community building, that is like creating safety, that is creating meaning out of all of the hard things that is life, and those things are just gonna follow those kids throughout life forever. And I think it's just so incredibly important. Everything you talked about, that to me is like, that's it.
So, thanks, and it's, there's a ton of effort and support behind it, it's not any one, I mean, Jude is the face of it, but I mean, there's, you know.
It
I
works
can't,
really collaboratively with a lot of staff.
yeah, so then,
And
you know, this isn't in there, I mean, it's in the title, but so these restorative practices, right, like. You know, I feel like educators, administrators, especially in this district, are like sick and tired of punitive punishment. You know, and I think you're all like, yeah, thank you, right? And we see, you know, with restorative practices and bringing kids together, the victim and, you know, or whatever the harm is, the 2 or 3 kids that are involved in these situations, notifying parents, telling them what, you know, happened, what I've been able to discover, and the truths and the lies and all, you know, whatever the situation is, bringing kids together and saying, hey, you know, your kind of like consequence is having to talk to these kids about the harm you caused and how it made that other kid feel. You need to listen to that. And so there's that piece, right? And then there's the, how do we move on? Like there's something within our community that is wrong. You know, you were mean, or you know, did something that caused a significant pause in education, in the learning of, you know, your classmates. We need to have a conversation about this. We need to figure out, you know, how we can get you back into class and how the people that are impacted by it feel valued. And they're like, all right, I trust that this probably won't happen again because we've had this open conversation. And it needs to be safe, it needs to be valued, it needs to be authentic. And so we're just starting that work like authentically, but we've seen, you know, good support from parents, you know, kind of waivers at times, like sometimes parents are weary to say, I don't really want my kid in that meeting to have to face that. You know, they are the ones, the aggressor. And I get that, but it's like, they're the aggressor because they've never had to face like the true consequence of the victim saying like, hey, this really impacted me. So like, as we kind of break down that traditional consequence barrier, we hope to see, you know, gains and a reduction in negative behaviors and an increase in, you know, positive intent, positive outcomes, and, you know, quite honestly, kids being nice to each other. It's, you know, that simple, really. Yeah. And then, you know, we had to put ACE in there because what, you know, what restorative practice, community and culture slide doesn't have ACE in it. But in all seriousness, ACE, you know, and Pete for that matter, are pivotal parts of this puzzle, right? Obviously on the disciplinary side, we keep Pete out of it, but like to bring the kids back to a level where we are able to communicate and talk effectively, ACE at times, you know, when it's appropriate, you know, can be brought in and used, and you know, we do see a shift in kids, you know, kind of demeanor, which really is the intent. And then the last one, which is different and new, and we presented it, you know, last month on it, but you know, Project Adventure, right? It's just a different way of thinking. It's a different way to get kids, adults, anyone that participates in it involved. And the ropes is just like a tiny piece of it. It's just like, once you've mastered all the stuff that Project Adventure, you know, with social, emotional, and community, and you know, collaborative work, the ropes just become part of like the activity. It's I'm almost looking at it now currently as like a secondary piece to the learning that, you know, what Project Adventure really is behind, and it's teamwork, collaboration, you know, and getting kids involved in a task that gets them out of their chairs.
So this is our final slide. Are there questions for Jeff before?
Comments, questions?
No.
Bill's not-
Maybe this hour I shouldn't be asking.
I remember being in O'Malley, one of my most vivid and long lasting memories was, I think it was like once a month on a Friday, at the end of the week, we would like knock off like the last hour. And there was like like special elective students like would submit an idea to do a special like, you know, group, like a little club. They would all get together. I forget what it was called, but it was like so fun. We actually skateboarded. You can imagine, but other kid, you know, groups did other things.
Well, student choices is really what you remember is, yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay. I mean, yeah, I don't know how long that lasts, but is that,
Well, I'm just saying, student choice, you remember it because it's impactful, because you
Yeah.
guys had a say in what.
oh, yeah,
Well, I think we touch on almost all of these here, so if there's anyone in particular that you want to.
No, I think that the only one that I really, that doesn't just recap is probably the addition of the SEL Tier 1 instruction. So I talked about that a little bit, but I'll go into a little more detail. So we're planning on having a teacher that comes in the fall and is part of the specialist cycle that will provide a foundation for all our kids with social emotional skills. So this is the attempt to help provide that foundation that so many of our kids are demonstrating lacking skills with. So the person will, the first year, do the instruction for all kids with potentially trails. That's what is indicated. We may do some other things as well. And then in future years, it will be the 6th grade gets the foundation, and then we would function as a Tier 2 intervention as we do with math and literacy for social emotional learning. So there would be a process for identifying students who need an extra scoop of social emotional instruction, and they would, just like we talked about with math and literacy, rotate through in a term and get additional instruction, whether it's about anxiety or self-regulation or perseverance, whatever is holding them up. This is the plan for that. Other things here, I think the rest of it is all things that we've talked about. The reorganization of special ed services are 2 of our current named programs, Custom House and the Student Support Center, are going to be revamped into what we're terming partnership services. So there's a little bit of streamlining going on there. There are some things that work in Custom House around students having a small group skill support block, around having a social group. So that will be part of the whole program for all the kids, not program, part of the services that all kids are attached to. All of these kids are fully mainstream, so it's a full inclusion program. And then in addition to that, one of the shifts we're making is with our adjustment counselors. Currently, all 3 of our adjustment counselors work with all 3 grades. So in order to streamline it, make it more effective, each adjustment counselor will be assigned to a grade level. So at each grade level, we will have a guidance counselor, an adjustment counselor that works with students in partnership services, but also services other students that might not need that level of service, and then the assistant principal. And all 3 of those people will move with the kids. So they'll start with them at 6th, go to 7th, and go to 8th. So they know the kids well. It will help inform the teachers at the next grade level. And then it provides them the opportunity to not be running to student review team meetings at 7th grade, then 8th grade, then 6th grade. There was 6th grade, or there was 7th grade, or there was 8th. So yes, the end of those, no, the 3 adjustment counselors came in with COVID 2 years
This would be
ago.
the second.
Yeah.
Because in the first budget I did, we added it.
Right.
That one, as a position.
It shifted from a special ed teacher to an adjustment counselor.
Anyway,
No, it was an addition.
Yes.
We added another
it's
the
before.
year before you were here.
Okay.
So that is new, having the
This will be
third.
the second year of that.
Yeah,
Yeah, because it's Mark. This is Mark's second year.
no,
Oh, no, I'm
He's
sorry.
guidance.
no,
Sorry.
that we need flat is the addition. Yeah. So
Um,
we're excited about.
I just wanted, sorry, you.
I'm good.
Pretty great. I wanted to sort of, sort of recap and just a couple takeaways. You can take that slide off.
How long did you work on that?
No, I was like, no questions.
So there are a couple, one sort of just addition and then I want to recap. So the crucial piece, especially for middle school, is kids are connected, they belong, and you have a say in things. Okay, can I connect even further? Okay. And while Ben's been working on that for a long time, we made it really clear in the plan for ongoing improvement by working with the school. And this is priority one, goal one. And with O'Malley in that area about belonging and engagement is about students taking ownership, being involved in decision making, engagement, belonging. And you just saw really good examples of that. So that's just connecting the work that they've described and they're doing. Teachers, assistant principals, Kate, others, guidance counselors, the plan for ongoing improvement. Okay, it's really driving that. And I think by shining a light on it, it's really, I think accelerated the work that folks are doing. So that's an important piece because that's foundational, right? The other piece is that the student learning isn't where we want it to be. Okay, I'll be clear about that. I think folks will be clear about that. We want growth to be better. We want depth to be better. We want engagement to be better. While that concerns me, that's one takeaway. The other takeaway is O'Malley doing things to shift that. Okay, and that's starting with belonging and student voice and choice and engagement, and then gets into curriculum work, gets into the data work, gets into interventions, interventions are also affecting special education instruction in terms of the academic support classes. So I don't want to walk away this thinking that we think that we got it wired. Okay? It's not done. Okay, the work is accelerating. The right things are happening and are getting into place even more. And we have really dedicated, skilled staff, and that combination of those things is going to lead to deeper learning, deeper engagement, and better results. But so I think that's the pieces that we are putting the teams and the teachers are working together in a really focused way, putting this into place at many levels. And there's ways to go. So that's my message to all of you. I hope that's what comes across as opposed to like fix. So folks are working so hard on it every day, and I really believe they're working on the right thing.
It's some very small things, which I know you're already aware of, and I know you're already aware of, and I think it's even been mentioned when James has been here, but the 8th grade is, struggling on a lot of things, and obviously they're about to go through this big transition to 9th grade. So I know already, but I'm just sort of saying it out loud that you guys have a lot of attention on them, particularly in preparing the 9th, the teachers who were going to, the communication between the 8th grade and the 9th grade about how, because it feels like they may need extra support. And I'm sure you're already on it.
Well, thank you. Sure. Thanks for
Thank
having
you
us.
very much. Stay away. Thanks for being here.
Yes, you don't have to stay for the rest of our lives. Back up and you should. But thank you for.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much.
Okay, we will move on to action.
Tonight.
Thank you very much.
First item under action is the revised.
Yeah, so we had just quickly, so we had a snafu in the calendar, which none of us caught, which was we had the wrong week for February vacation, April vacation, a year from now, okay? We had a lot of eyes on it.
We saw that one too.
Oh, yeah, we had multiple times, all of us,
It
so.
was like the 3rd week, it's just the same week, but then noticed that
Of course, as soon as you share with teachers, someone would invite us, and anyway, so just want to, that's posted, but just want to make sure we have the formality of approving the revised calendar. So what's in your packets is the calendar with the correct April break. next year.
I move that we approve the revised calendar in the packet.
Second,
Revised calendar for fiscal year 24.
Yes, yes,
Because it wasn't changed.
what is it, 23, 24?
yes.
No discussion, right? Okay,
Mhm.
vote please.
Ms. Weason? Yes. Jefferson
Yes.
Clancy, Mr. Melvin,
Yes.
Mr. Minio,
Certainly.
Ms. Prince,
Yes.
and Ms. Watson.
Yes.
And then sorry.
Good.
Well, I'm the grants.
Yeah.
I'm going to go to grants. Well, I just want to
Why
explain,
doesn't it have an amount?
what's that?
Why doesn't it have an amount?
The last one. I
How
can
do we
explain
approve
it.
it without an amount?
I can explain it.
Okay, well, I'm trying to explain GF one, I don't have a slide on this, but I'll do it verbally. The GHS and O'Malley Auditorium feasibility study, PDF $20,000, that's $25,000 towards a $75,000 study. What we are beginning, and I say we, because it's us, and also GF is really helping thinking through this. We realized more and more that, as you have heard again and again and acknowledged tonight, our performing arts programs are getting better and better, and more involvement. And that's from a lot of work from our staff, from public, from families, students, and also GEF has been a huge part of that. And we also, as we go to our places, the two auditoriums, GHS and O'Malley, look around and realize that, maybe these places aren't the sort of quality of the experience that matches the performances. And so we're beginning a process on learning about how we can improve them, upgrade them. Everything from sound and lighting to access to just surfaces, new seats, that sort of stuff. That takes money in order to just learn what we can do and what it would cost. And so we're going to first do the feasibility study, which will give us a sense of cost and scope. And then hopefully work with GF and others, as well as the city, of course, and the school and all of you to raise the dollars to get, then decide what we want to do, what you know what the potential scope is. Doesn't mean we do everything, may not be able to, but then decide what the nature of the projects will be, then pursue funding over time to get them. So that's what that kicks off. We're putting $2,000 funding to get that study cost. I was disappointed to learn how much money you have to spend in order to learn
How much
what
money
a
is
project even is, but that's checking with others, including Mike Hale, they confirm it's what you do. So that grant, and so GF has been GF, and also Kathy has been a big part of it in terms of just looking at other. You mentioned Chelsea High School, look at their auditorium because they've done some rehab there. So look closely at what they're doing. I'm sure you guys have.
And the hope there, similar to, I would think the field and stadium, is that we would get private donations.
Yeah. So I think we'll the intent here or the desire is to do a public-private partnership.
Yeah.
Or, on that, and hopefully GF has already been a great partner on it and
Yeah.
thinking, but also this initial funding. And hopefully will help us with that as well.
Can I ask that we refer this to being for a discussion, put this on a plan, a capital plan, as opposed to just taking money to something that hasn't been discussed as a group before, accept money on it.
So this
It
is
would just put it off for 2 weeks till our next meeting.
sure, I think so. I mean, it's a study to understand what we might do. It's not to do any work.
No, I understand that, but I just want to make sure that it fits in our priorities of what we're doing,
Yeah, so-
capital projects, that's all.
Yes, but
I'm not
that,
saying I'm against it, I just think
sure.
it should be more of a conversation before we start accepting money. To do something that we haven't discussed as a,
Sure, so
and we meet with BNF next week, so if we put on next week's
Yeah.
agenda, it would fall, that we could put this approval on our next school committee.
so not my decision to do that. So,
Yeah,
but I think it's
I just think it's the proper channels, do projects, that's all. Or talk about doing projects and what our priorities are. And I'm not saying it's not a good project, I just think that-
That's not my decision.
Or to come at a whole committee to accept a grant to do something that we haven't really discussed.
Yeah,
I just think it needs a little bit more
Yeah, And
vetting.
what we can do at that meeting is bring to you the scope of the feasibility studies So you see what they're gonna actually produce for us.
Mhm.
And the cost, obviously the cost, right? Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, thank you. All right. Do you want to talk about the other GF grants? Or should I just make? a
Oh.
motion? I'll make
Yeah.
a motion. So that then we need to. Yeah, I think you're gonna talk to one of them, I think. I'll make a motion that we accept. That we approve the grants from the Gloucester Education Foundation. One Beaman Theater Program for $500, Plum Cove Theater Program for $500, resident scientist at O'Malley Innovation Middle School for $14,000. And I so moved.
Second.
I thought you might want to explain the resident scientist at O'Malley.
So we've had that in the past, we don't currently have it, but that resident scientist will work in the science lab at O'Malley and help with experiments or whatever. It's a donor, private donor that comes through GEF specifically to help with curriculum and further the wonderful work they're doing in the science lab.
Any discussion? Okay, roll call vote, please.
Ms. Reason. Yes.
Chairperson Clancy. Yes.
Mr. Melvin.
Yes.
Mr. Minio.
Yes.
Ms. Prince. Yes. Ms. Watson.
Yes. The next item is Department of Elementary and Secondary Education grants. I move that we approve fiscal year 23 FC 185 high quality instructional materials implementation grant in the amount of $90,000 and fiscal year 23 21st Century Community Learning Centers grant FC 644 internship enhancement grant in the amount of $44,640. And I so moved.
Second.
Yeah.
And here, all right, the first one, 185 high quality instructional materials implementation grant. That's a grant obviously from DESE to implement, it's getting late, implement a curriculum that we've had already selected at the time that we applied. So it cannot go towards O'Malley, but it was written to go towards the Wit and Wisdom implementation. So what it's paying for is a lot of stipends as far as literacy leaders and some summer work and those kind of trainings that we have to have. And also for the outside consultants to have Wit and Wisdom trainers come here and work with our teachers. So it is a grant that needs to be spent by the end of the summer. So we have lots of training and literacy leaders and meetings that have been going on, but this is how we're going to be able to fund them as well. That's the first one. And the second one is 21st Century. It is going to go along with O'Malley Academy. And it's going to allow us to have interns from the high school come down and work with our middle school students to help within the academy after schools.
Sure. Do you have any hand up? No.
Okay, quick question. The first one. When we do that work over the summer, is there gonna be any training the trainer involved in that professional development so
Yes.
that we can carry on?
Yes, we're
And you have to
also.
explain it. Yes,
Yes.
it's good for me.
So absolutely there is. We're also making sure our coaches who are outstanding. Have that extra level of
Okay.
training, because. We rely on them to do training all the time, but they don't necessarily always get their own training. So we want them, they already are the experts, but we really want to solidify that in this new curriculum. So they also will get some additional training. So absolutely.
Maria, roll call vote, please.
There wasn't a motion yet.
Oh, you approve, I think.
Oh, there was.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Ms. Reason. Yes. Chairperson Clancy.
Yes.
Mr. Melvin.
Yes.
Mr. Minio.
Yes.
Ms. Prince. Yes. Ms. Watson.
Yes. Okay. You want to
One more.
explain? You want to explain that, everyone?
So this is, it's a cyber security awareness program. There's not an amount because the grant is we are accepted into this program. And from that, we have access to certain cyber security training that most of leadership and a few others will take. And once we have completed, once they have completed once we've had everyone complete the cyber security training, what it allows us is to have an insurance to help protect our network if something were to happen. So there's not really a monetary amount. What it does is to receive the insurance, it's contingent on us completing the cybersecurity. So being brought into that program is allowing us the insurance for our
This is about us not going for phishing or ransomware, or wearing phishing and ransomware scams. Not falling for that. It's the focus of.
So I just had this training on the state side, and now they send us emails at work during the day to test us whether we
Yeah, they
open
test
things or not.
Kidding?
Now I don't open anything from the job board.
Yeah.
Because I'm afraid it's a test.
It's probably the same grant.
Yeah.
Yeah, or one very similar.
It's good training.
That's great.
Yeah, we get, the city IT and school IT.
But now it makes me.
Yeah.
feel the
Collaborate.
Contact us maybe by text, like, do you
So like,
We actually,
Yeah.
it was an email from an outside provider, their personal email got hacked, something came through and the principal said, I'm not opening it. I know who it's
Yeah.
from, but it doesn't pass.
It doesn't
because
pass,
Based on
yeah.
this kind of training, so it's a good thing.
Okay,
Unless you're really sending out an email, you want them to read and they say, no, I'm not gonna trust it.
Yeah, because you
That's what
spelled
comes
something
out of
wrong,
it,
because that's
yeah.
one of the things.
That's where I'm at.
okay, I move that we approve the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Executive Office of Technology and Services and Security Grant. Municipal Cybersecurity Awareness Program. Session. Roll call vote, please.
Ms. Easton, yeah, Jefferson Clancy,
Yes.
Mr. Melvin,
Yes.
Minio,
Yes.
Ms. Prince.
Yes.
Ms. Wilson. Yes.
That concludes the action. Is there anything else to add regarding East Veterans Elementary School?
Just quickly, had a building committee meeting last week, things, as I said, on time, on schedule, on budget. So much so that we've been able to, bring back some of the, elements that were valued a year out, like benches outside. There's one of them, or like normal ones, and then trash receptacles, things like that. Different border around the playground. And really now. We're reminded of building the project team that we don't have to come in at budget, we can come at under budget. I want to make sure that they make decisions around, that as a goal now. Instead of that budget. It's pretty remarkable. That project this size at this time is now working towards under budget. So.
And they have been working on Saturdays for at least the last. There was a notice to the neighbors that there is work that they can do on weekends to kind of catch up where they're a little bit behind.
Great.
And the other thing is, I have suggested that they schedule another tour for us, since it's starting to look more, in another phase, that it would be kind of fun and exciting to see it at this.
There is on March 27th, city council has invited you to it. So you can go, we can go then, or we go.
Yeah, that's on the.
Good job.
Might be a violation of executive session.
We'll find a date. Absolutely. Okay. That concludes the business.
I move that we
Oh.
adjourn.
Bill, did you have something you wanted to?
Oh, just request a review of the student cell phone policy to be carried out by I think the personnel subcommittee. We talked about.
Program.
Programs, yeah. And that they come forth with any recommendations to the full council.
Without objection.
Is there an IT policy that should go with that too? They can. That
Was it social media?
social media, something, there might be a couple calls.
Social media, cell phone.
Both.
That'll be both, I guess.
Access.
Social media, I guess we could do both.
Well, Melissa had already referred, filming, policy on filming.
Oh, I didn't know. if you
Well,
did
I
that.
didn't, I sent a suggestion in an email, I think Bill's officially doing it,
No, there was
Did I?
referral months ago,
was there?
yeah.
Well, now there's another reason, so I would
Okay.
double up on both that, the social
Yeah,
media
no,
and the
Yeah.
cell phone.
What was the third one? Something about filming?
I thought there was a night,
There was a.
I thought there was an IT policy. It might be just for staff, not kids.
Yeah. There's an IT policy. There's a
Isn't there a
social
policy
media
that covers
policy.
how they use
Something to know computers.
computers?
It's acceptable use.
Except that's the one I'm thinking of. Acceptable use policy. Acceptable use, right? I mean, acceptable use policy. And I don't
Is it
know.
just that one or?
No, all three.
All three. Wait,
Right.
filming, social media and cell phone.
Well, I think the filming falls under the cell phone
I
policy,
think it does.
and then the acceptable use goes with the cell phone policy, and then what was the third?
Social media.
Social media, yeah, exactly. Those are the
All
three
levels,
policies.
I guess, assume. The
The whole policy.
Policies. the whole level. All right, and social media, cell phones and filming.
Okay. Anybody wanna? make a
I move that we
motion?
adjourn. Notes.
Second. Okay. Great, Brian?
Ms. Weason. Yes. Ms. Clancy.
Yes.
Mr. Melvin.
Yes.
Mr. Minio. Ms.
Yes.
Prince.
No. Kidding,
Outvoted.
yes, absolutely.
Good night, all.
Sam, where did you get those drinks? Okay.
Common
Road?
Road.
That's right. This